Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo Sam Monson live on YouTube. Happy opening day, Sam.
Thank you. Big day for me.
Coming at you live from the Antonio Cromartie studio in Part with Huggies. All brought to you by FanDuel. We have a very special show today.
Yep.
We have a very special guest. We're talking running back rankings with a little fantasy slant as well.
Okay.
So let's bring in JJ. He's already here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I meant to ask you off air, really. Zachariason, right?
That's right. Yeah, you got it. You nailed it.
Okay. Because, when I read it in my head for the last decade plus, that is not what I said in my head. But I heard you say it recently, and I wanted to remember it properly. And then I was going to confirm, and I forgot to.
Your last name is just Palazzolo, and you just start rolling your tongue.
Just make up some syllables.
Enrico Palazzo.
The late round QB, JJ Zachariason. JJ, welcome. How are you doing, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate you guys inviting a fantasy guy onto the show.
Don't say it too loudly here. You're doing running back rankings for everything here. Don't worry about it. It's been a great week. It's a little home and home for you and I. I did your show yesterday, and as you highlighted, we've interacted on the interwebs here for over a decade, and it was the first time we'd actually done a show together. So look at this, 2 in 2 days.
Yeah, it's great. And Sam, I think this is the first time that we've done a show together too now.
Yeah, I would say this is the most, boomer podcast that's been out there for a while, but we had Greg Cosell on yesterday, so it's going to take a lot to beat that for just sheer old man quantity amongst the three of us.
Somebody in the comments said I'm biased against old people, but I love Greg. What? Greg was great yesterday. If you guys haven't listened yesterday, we did some QB rankings with Greg. And JJ, I love having a slightly different angle here because it's also a good week for this because it's not just the fantasy angle, but the fantasy community has done great work on skill position players and projecting them going forward. And I think it meshes with our analytically driven show here. So let me start with this. First off, tell everybody what you do, where they can find it, and what your process is when we get into rankings and what you're looking at this time of year as we head into the draft.
Yeah, so my approach with most things football is analytics based. I certainly am still watching stuff because I think that it's ridiculous to put us into these buckets that we have to be this way or we have to be this way. But yeah, I mean with this time of year with prospecting in particular, I have what's called the ZAP model, very appropriately named the Zachariason adjusted prospect model. And so this model, what it does is it looks at incoming wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs, and it looks at certain metrics. These guys, a lot of production-related stuff in college, and then obviously height, weight, some of the stuff at the combine. Not too much from the combine, but it looks at those inputs, and it spits out a score for these players, which tries to predict and forecast how well they're going to perform in fantasy football over the first 3 years of their career. So that's really what the model is aiming towards and trying to forecast and predict. And so I put together a prospect guide every year. That came out about a week and a half ago. And everything's on lateround.com. I got the Late Round Fantasy Football podcast that I've been doing for about 8 years. I'm aging myself at this point, but been doing it for a while now, 8 or 9 years. And yeah, I mean, I'm very immersed in the fantasy football world, and I don't try to pretend that I am someone who, can properly evaluate an edge or, an offensive lineman. I mean, I am a skill position guy first and foremost.
So what have you found over the years to be the most kind of predictive data points out there? Obviously, you've kind of put the whole thing together into one broader overarching model, but what are the numbers that you think people should be focusing on and maybe the ones that they should definitely not be focusing on as we do all this?
Yeah, there's definitely differences position by position, of course, right? The one thing that I would say overarching is that I think that when I see people doing this kind of data-driven work, or even just the regular fan, the average fan that's an accountant during the day that might not have the ridiculous amount of time to dig in and build models and stuff. I'd say that the main thing is to not just take raw data, receptions, yards, just the raw stuff, and think that that's overly predictive because it's really not. There's such a wide variety of schemes and play calling and play styles at the college level that looking at it from that way, you're not really getting an apples to apples comparison. So a lot of times what you should be doing is looking at market share numbers and looking at, attempt share, or, I look at a metric at wide receiver, receiving yards per team pass attempt, which is pretty intuitive of what that's all about. But then On top of that, layering on top of that, there's a lot of age adjustments that go on. So, a player who performs in their freshman, sophomore year, Casey Concepcion, for instance, he didn't have like a crazy ceiling season, throughout his 3 years in college, but he produced right away at NC State. Like he was productive immediately. And he was, used in a lot of different ways as well. But that age-adjusted production is really, really important. So even if that ceiling season never really hit, at least he had, that early career production. Whereas some players, Xavier Legette, when he came out, there was not a lot of production. And then that production finally came late. And then that unfortunately got him boosted a little bit, I think, in the NFL draft that final season. And that's when teams and fantasy managers and whomever kind of get into trouble. So it's really age-adjusted production. I do some schedule adjustments too, so program strength and such is important. But at wide receiver, you could look at receiving yards per team pass attempt. That's a pretty good metric. And then at running back, which is obviously pertinent for today because we're going to be talking running backs, but running back, what I found is unbelievably important is receiving work. Now, I've seen takes that, a guy who's just, most running backs can catch a swing and be able to do something, some of these basic routes that running backs run. Not all running backs. Very rarely do we get guys that are Christian McCaffrey level that are able to line up all over the formation. But with that being said, what receiving numbers do from a collegiate production standpoint is that it tells you two things. Number one, it tells you intent, right? It tells you that the team is trying to get that player the ball in some way. And then that shows us talent to some degree. It's like a proxy for talent. And then the second thing is that if a running back is getting that receiving work in college, generally speaking, those guys are pass catchers in the NFL. Generally speaking, it's not a one-to-one. I always say productive college players are not automatically productive in the NFL, but productive NFL players are almost always productive in college, right? And so when you look at it from that perspective, receiving is hugely important at running back, especially when you layer in the draft capital factor, which is what I do in my models, because it's obviously important. There's a film evaluation embedded in that. There's, teams spending millions of dollars trying to forecast and project who's good and who's not. And then those guys also get opportunity quicker. If a guy gets drafted in the first, running back is drafted in the first round, that team's going to use that running back immediately and a lot because they want to make sure that they, made the right choice and show people that they made the right choice. And so there's a lot of that with draft capital. And draft capital, in my opinion, from what I've researched, really captures a lot of the rushing production side, but it's just not capturing the receiving side nearly enough. So I think the biggest differentiator at running back is the receiving side, not just from like a fantasy perspective, because it matters a lot in fantasy. The receiving work matters a lot in fantasy in these full PPR and half PPR leagues and such. I'd argue even from a real NFL perspective that teams are not weighing the receiving aspect enough for these running backs when we know that's something that's very, very important in today's game.
I love it. It's a fascinating approach because when you put that next to what scouts are doing, they're very much saying what's this player? What are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? Where does he fit into our system? And if I had to sum up fantasy a little bit, fantasy is like half figuring out the player and half figuring out the game theory, right? The psychology. Right. You're essentially trying to figure out the psychology of the teams and what they think. And I'm with you on when you say draft capital, I used to be against this because I feel like so many of us who just watched Mel Kiper and watched the draft growing up, we were talking off air, Sam, about how so much of the ESPN drafts were just, did this team do well by Mel? You know what I mean? What the analysis was, where did Mel have him? Where was he drafted? Right? So I feel like we were all trained to believe in your own, evaluations, basically, right? If you're going to do this, you believe in your own evaluations. So I didn't buy the consensus board or the draft capital thing until you realize that's a really informative piece, right, for positions because it's taking in so much information. And then the idea of market share, which is, essentially how often are you used? How often are you trusted by your current team and your coaches? It's almost like a psychology thing as much as what do my eyes tell me? And I think it's a great compliment to the scouting piece and what you see.
Yeah, 100%. And look, from a draft capital perspective, yes, teams get stuff wrong all the time. We know they get stuff wrong all the time, right? But it's tested. I've tested hundreds of metrics throughout my time of prospecting, and draft capital still gets a lot of signal. And I've actually tested a lot of mock draft related stuff too. That stuff gets signal too. I was tweeting about it yesterday, and people are like, "Oh, mock draft stuff is stupid," and blah, blah. I mean, there's a pretty strong correlation between not only where these aggregate sites are now pulling in all this mock draft data, not only where like they're placing players, there's a strong correlation, but even when there's disagreement with actual draft capital and where these guys were ranked, where these guys were ranked from a mock draft standpoint often is better. Like you can look at like reaches, if you will, in the draft, and the reaches, if you just compare actual draft capital to mock draft data, they're usually busts. It's at least at wide receiver and running back and the stuff that I've tested. So I think that's important too. Like just taking in all of that data and not, measuring it in some insane way and just like leaning in on it too hard. You're measuring it in a measured way and you're doing it all analytically and mathematically.
Well, that like the draft, there's so many variables, so many data points, so many things that can impact this, and so many biases everywhere that there's power to the wisdom of the crowds. There's power to just like smoothing out all those rough edges and not deviating from the center.
And 100%. I'm just saying,
a good example is like there's going to be a team that drafts like Andy Isabella in round 2 where we might have liked him. Don't get me wrong. Like I didn't mind Isabella back then. My process has changed a little bit since then. Or better example, Tutu Atwell, right? Where we're like, this guy, not many people had a second round grade on this guy, right? And mock drafts didn't have him going as high as he did. And there's going to be teams that reach like that at times. But like you said, Sam, like that's one data point, right? Like you're trusting one team to get that right and to give us that data point, whereas the wisdom of the crowds can be a lot more impactful than just that.
We were Andy Isabella fans over here.
I was too. I shouldn't have done that to us. I'm sorry.
We were brought along by Renner. I like to
blame Renner loved him, right?
Renner
loved him.
I had concerns, but I was swept up in the wave.
It's all
right?
Renner.
Look what he did against Georgia.
I looked at the tape and I was like, anytime anybody touches him, he can't make a play. That seems like a problem. But his production's amazing and Renner loves him. Let's roll with it.
We live, we learn. So really quick too, like Sam and I, every time we come out draft night and after that, we always have this takeaway that teams aren't doing crazy stuff as much anymore. And I think a lot of it's because of the aggregated draft boards. You don't have like the Steelers drafting Terrell Edmunds in the first round when everybody else had him in the 4th. And he ended up being a fine starter. But like the week that he was announced as a potential first round pick, everybody was like, what, who, why? There used to always be a random safety going in the first round. The Seahawks in the early Schneider years would just have their own draft board. I'm not saying it was right or wrong, because they did well with Bobby Wagner and Russ and everything. But like Bruce Irvin, like they just went off their own draft board and surprised people. But I don't think you see that. I think teams play the board better. They still have their players, but they know like if I can get this guy in the 3rd, I'm going to get him in the 3rd. Like it deviates at some point.
The variance is tightened up.
It has.
Everyone's closer to the consensus now.
And I think that's because of consensus boards and the way some of the data is aggregated. All right, before we get into running back rankings, I got one more thing. I think we're in a golden age. We're all data people here, right? We like data, information, and figuring out, getting to better answers. We're in like a golden age here of people taking one data point, putting it out there, and then saying, here, look at this one data point. This player is going to be good, bad, whatever it may be. I've seen you brain dump on this a little bit on X. Your thoughts on where we are as far as how should we be using information that we have at our fingertips more than ever?
Yeah, I mean, part of it for me is like I don't want people to like give the fantasy space a bad name when there is some like really good work that's being done, in the fantasy space. Like there's a lot of great work at running back and wide receivers being done. Even like Harmon has really like Matt Harmon been someone who's really been in both worlds with the work that he's been doing. And so when I see yards per route run, career yards per route run under 2, right, and then they just list all these busts, and then the player that they're analyzing has a career yards per route run of 1.99. That's not that telling because you're looking at a sample size of all the players who are worse than that guy in that metric. And there's just a greater story to tell. We should never, the way that I kind of approach prospecting is every player is perfect at the start. And then what I'm trying to do is just find the concerns, find the red flags, and dig into that profile. And the more red flags that I find, the more afraid I am of that prospect, right? But you have to have an open mind with this stuff. You have to understand there's an absurd amount of variance. Like the draft capital stuff I was talking about, just to give you like a kind of like a nerdy like R² related analysis with this stuff. If you look at top 100 wide receivers since 2011, and you look at the R squared, so the correlation, and you could say predictiveness, or what explains this, R squared between draft capital and how many points per game they score in fantasy football during their first 3 years. Okay, so it's the way that I measure this is called B2S, which is the best 2 seasons in PPR points per game across their first 3 years in the league. Okay, and I just average those numbers together. If you look at the correlation between draft capital, so where these wide receivers were drafted, and how well they scored in fantasy football, it's 0.14 for top 100 wide receivers. It's not very strong whatsoever. So like that, and look, across the entire sample, across the entire draft, day 3 guys suck, and what that does is it raises that R squared value, and it becomes a lot more predictive. But when you're looking within that snapshot, what it's telling you is that this stuff has an absurd. Now, NFL teams are looking at this differently. They're not necessarily trying to find the guy who's going to be the most productive in fantasy. I get all of that, but what it's basically saying is that there's a lot of freaking variance with this stuff. You know, like, we're going to be wrong. People are going to be wrong. Constantly. And to say, I don't like this guy because he had a 1.99 yards per route run rate in his career, and we've never really seen many hits, below that 2 mark. Okay, if it was at 2.01, you'd like him more. That's literally like 1 30-yard catch, across his career. There's just no reason to look at it that black and white. That's my issue with that kind of threshold analysis.
Yeah, like we were trying to talk about that a bit with Casey Concepcion, which probably hasn't gone out yet as a solo video on the channel, but will be soon. That like his sort of ball skills, right? Whether you term it as drop rate, you start rolling all that kind of stuff up generally and say, look, ball skills to us are a concern for him, but everything else is amazing. And it's like, but it's not this black and white thing where his ball skills, every number there definitely says not a chance, right? It's like he's borderline. He's somewhere in that gray area in the middle where you're like, this could go either way. This could be a career-defining problem where it's just too big of an issue and he's never able to overcome it, and he hangs around the league for a few years, and eventually the league just kind of goes, you know what, it's not worth it. Or it could be something where he improves on it just a little bit, and then it's just an average thing, right? He's league average with ball skills, and he's amazing route running, and so he becomes a really productive player who drops 2 to 3 more passes than the elite players at his position every single year. And from this vantage point right now, there's really no way of knowing. Like, it's just an educated guess. And yet people are going to be out there going, this data point's just below the threshold, time to walk away.
Well, or the other end, the Puka Nacua charts, which is like, here's Puka Nacua in a Spartan chart, and here's a bunch of draft prospects near him.
Draft all of them.
Get the Puka guys, right? Get the guys. How did we miss Puka Nacua? Look at this chart that shows how good he was at these things. How did we miss on him? Anyway, it's I like the discussion, the philosophical discussion as much as anything. But let's get to some running back rankings. Who's running back 1, JJ?
It's tough. It's a tough year for so Jeremiyah Love, very clearly the RB1 in this class. Very rarely, Steve and I were actually talking about this on my show, where there's really not many examples of this high quality running back going in the top 10, going in the top half of the draft with a teammate that is likely to have pretty decent draft capital as well. You could go, people have said, Bijan Roschon Johnson. It's like, not exactly. Roschon was a day 3 pick. It wasn't really the same situation as what we expect with Jadarian Price going more than likely on day 2. I mean, some have even said end of round 1. And then Steve brought up the Auburn guys from back in the 2000s, with Ronnie Brown and Cadillac Williams. And I think that's probably the closest comp that we have to the situation. But despite that fact, it's kind of crazy that Jeremiyah Love, even from a counting stat standpoint and from a market share standpoint and attempt share, all these metrics still line up really well for him. I mean, the 3 main production metrics in the ZAP model are prorated reception share in their best season. That's not adjusted for anything. And then it looks at adjusted yards per team play. So that's pretty intuitive, just the amount of yards that a player had divided by the number of plays that team ran. So that's both rushing and receiving. And then there's adjusted yards per team pass attempt. That's a receiving metric, right? So receiving yards per team pass attempt. And that's adjusted for age, and it's adjusted for strength of schedule. And Jeremiyah Love, 65th percentile reception share when you look back at guys drafted since 2011, which is where the database goes back to. 94th in adjusted yards per team play, which is pretty insane. And then 83rd percentile in adjusted yards per team pass attempt. All of those metrics, still can be impacted by teammate competition. And the fact that he had Jadarian Price back there and he was still doing what he did from a production standpoint is pretty crazy. And then a lot of the advanced stuff, the stuff that PFF publishes, 88th percentile in avoided tackles per attempt, 75th in explosive run rate, 95th percentile in yards after contact per attempt. Everything lines up for Jeremiyah Love to be a stud in the league. There's a discussion that obviously, is not what I do in the fantasy world anymore. I used to do more so with the value of running back, and I won't get into that. But, he at least from a prospecting standpoint does look like a stud.
The other obvious example, I can't believe you didn't remember this one because we linked them, is McFadden and Felix Jones.
Oh, yeah, because you were given a McFadden comp for Jeremiyah Love.
So
yeah.
McFadden went top 10 somewhere, and then Felix Jones went lower down in that first round.
Yeah.
That's probably the closest
and
comp
both
there.
Unbelievable athletes, speed,
Yeah.
And it was like the same thing where it's like McFadden was the superstar prospect, and then it's like, hey, by the way, this guy in the backfield with him is also really good.
The crazy thing about, and I mentioned on your show, JJ, like Cadillac Williams was the 5-star recruit, big name, and then Ronnie Brown ends up going first. It's second overall, and Cadillac
with much less
fifth.
production, right?
With less production, yeah. I was going to ask about the market share thing because I assumed, like even just watching Notre Dame in passing, where I'm like, hey, let me see Jeremiyah Love, and I'm like, oh, there's Jadarian Price making a big run again, and they keep feeding the backup, and then it's like, well, the backup's pretty good. I did wonder if that took a hit a little bit, especially compared to like last year. Genty had 6 games with 30+ carries. It was like a completely different workload between those two.
Yeah, and I'll say this about Love. Like, if I were to be really nitpicky, I would say that the model likes Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs and Ashton Genty a little bit more than Jeremiyah Love. But again, it's not going to capture everything and all the nuances that we would want it to capture. Because I think Jeremiyah Love playing at Boise State would probably put up similar numbers that Ashton Genty did, right? And so it's not going to capture all of that per se. And so my thing is like, let's not nitpick this stuff and let's just realize this is a very, very good prospect. And especially if he gets that top 10, top half of the first round draft capital, from a fantasy perspective, the hits are it's just unbelievable. The only bad running back since 2011 that is really, from a fantasy perspective, that has been drafted in the top half of the first round was Trent Richardson. And even Trent Richardson, his rookie season, was very productive. Like, had those numbers so you had an out, you had an off ramp if you draft him in Dynasty or something to get rid of him if you really wanted to. And so I think, Jeremiyah Love, it's just such a safe bet at this point.
And Trent Richardson is one of those, like we talk all the time about how Quentin Nelson was like the great unifier, no matter what world you came from, fantasy, film, old school NFL dinosaur, everyone loved Quentin Nelson, right? Richardson is like, no matter what perspective you were coming from, it's unexplainable why he wasn't good. There's no logic to it. Like, he should have been good and just wasn't.
Right.
That's what we need on our list of those, like Vernon Hargraves.
Great unexplained busts.
Like, this was like the perfect prospect, on field, off field, college production, traits, ticked every box, and then just wasn't good.
Just wasn't good.
Hated. Sad Trent. I'll just say this too. We mentioned on the show too, Sam. Jeremiyah Love probably hits the perfect balance of something like market share, but also not a ton of wear and tear for a running back, right? Having the idea of he wasn't overused in college, not a ton of, 25, 30 carry games or anything like that. And that, I'm not going to say it bodes well, but, you might get a little bit more durability from Love at the NFL level because he wasn't, used like an Ashton Genty was.
Yeah, so you're cutting out for a second, Steve.
Oh.
I can hear Sam well, though.
Oh, is it just me?
Well, that's all that matters.
Did I kick my...
Probably, yeah.
No.
You should just not touch anything technical within the studio at any point.
I haven't done anything.
He was just saying that the fact that he hasn't been run into the ground is probably a useful thing for his forward projected durability in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine so. From what I've researched, there hasn't been like an insane amount of correlation between usage in college to like the wear and tear stuff in the NFL or like injury rates in the NFL. Could just be that, it's a large enough sample that it's just going to be kind of noisy with that. It's going to be very difficult because there's not going to be many players that like completely break down at the NFL level, but it can't be a bad thing that he, right. We know that he has the traits to be a bell cow at the next level, but yet he didn't necessarily get destroyed, at the college level.
How am I doing right now, JJ? Am I coming through okay for you?
Everything. It's very. I can't hear very well. No, it's like jumping around and such. And Sam kind of did the last time I heard him talk too.
That could be an
I
internet thing. Who's RB2? That come through? Running back 2. Do you want to try to bring him back in, Will? We could take a second.
Yeah.
Running back 2 on the consensus board is Jadarian Price. So
Shout
this is
in the chat if we're coming through in the chat, and if it's just JJ they couldn't hear us, or if everybody can't hear us, because that's a bigger problem.
Yeah, I'd assume it's more of an internet thing. We'll work through it here. Robert Smith had a great breakdown. We have weekly calls with the 33rd team with former NFL players, coaches, executives, and everything. That's where we had a healthy running back discussion. So Robert did a great job breaking down Jeremiyah Love, Jadarian Price, the 2 Notre Dame running backs. Then we had a discussion with former executives, players, coaches, the whole thing on where do you take them and the value and everything.
Yeah.
And it was fun watching the differences between Love and Price. Price is number 2 on the consensus board. He's getting late first round type of hype, but I think we're all in this bucket. Yeah, Love is
it's
in that top 10 prospect.
It genuinely is a lot like that McFadden Felix Jones thing, because Felix Jones, I think he ended up going 20, 22, something like that. And it gathered steam as we went along.
Yeah.
Hey, this guy's pretty good. Hey, he could be. And then eventually he ends up, he got drafted above Chris Johnson that year.
I was about to say, maybe it's because Felix Jones had like 98 speed in Madden.
Right? No, he was really good, but it didn't start off that way.
Football.
You know what I mean? Like it rumbled the more the draft process went along, and his sort of stock kept going up and up and up and up, and then eventually, Darren McFadden's sidekick ends up getting drafted ahead of Chris Johnson in that draft by the time we actually got to draft day. So who knows where Jadarian Price will land? I doubt it goes that far, but it's a similar. We're seeing that kind of graph where the closer we get, the higher he gets, if just because he's RB2 in this class and, somebody needs a running back.
The other thing that I'll bring up when we use those charts all the time as far as what you're going to pay the running back, I think it's a data point in this conversation. So if the Titans at 4, the Giants at 5, if the Titans were to take Love, he would be the 7th paid running back in AAV over the course of his rookie contract. Giants, I believe it's 8th. Versus if they took an edge rusher, they would be 31st, 32nd.
Right.
Receiver would be 31st. So
the surplus value to a more valuable position is huge.
Now, again, I think that we've had people ask us about this, and I have different thoughts on this. I feel like the analytical community has leaned only on the dollar value, which, again, my criticism of some of my friends in the analytical community is we take massive data sets and try to roll it into just one number, and then you just focus on the one number. There's more than just how your cap savings on the draft pick, right? Because there is actually some production involved, right? Like how good is the player? How good is the player relative?
I know Dano has been taking some bullets on the internet in the last few days, but Dano, in relation to Jeremiyah Love, basically said, forget. I mean, the caption is always misleading, but his point was you put Jeremiyah Love in an offense, boom, 1,500 yards of instant offense, right? Like that was his nutshell point that I think actually people should focus on rather than the term of offensive weapon or whatever. I mean, that's the point you're making, right? Like there's production involved here. If you can click your fingers, add a draft pick, put this guy on the team, and immediately you've got 1,500 yards of offense that you didn't have before, or forget 1,500, but whatever you had with the last guy in there, right? 875 or whatever. 875 becomes 1,500 by clicking your fingers and putting Jeremiyah Love on the team. That's the production input that you're adding.
Yeah, there is a component to, if you knew you were getting Bijan Robinson over these last few years, whatever his production is, however you quantify that, is that actually worth it? Either at that price, at that price plus what you could get elsewhere. You just gotta there's multiple variables in this equation. Mm-hmm. The thing that Dan said that happens every year is we'll just call him offensive weapon.
But I don't think he meant it the same way that's usually used. So his point was don't get caught up in this conversation about running back value and blah, blah, blah. His point was he's 1,500 yards of offense. Don't even don't put a label on it. He's just going to add 1,500 yards worth of offense to your team, and that has value.
No, I get it.
But that's different to the way normally when people make that argument. It's like, no, he's not a running back. He's an offensive weapon, trademark, copyright symbol.
But they're usually saying that as in, like, he's a great football player. You just want this guy. You just want Jahmyr Gibbs. You just want offensive weapon on your team. That's what I hear.
Most of the time they're saying he's not a running back. He's this movable chess piece.
Jack of all trades.
He's this chess piece. We're going to line him up at receiver. We're going to line him up at everywhere in the offense. You're never going to know where he is, and that makes him impossible to cover. And usually it's just not, A, it's not true, and B, it never happens, right? That's not the argument I think that Dano, I think that is the argument that most people make. That was definitely the argument people were making with Jahmyr Gibbs. It's been the argument that people make with any running back that's got like receiving chops is no, he's going to be worth more than a running back because we're going to line him up everywhere, and it never works, right? Not to say that those players never become good players, but they're good running backs. They don't become offensive weapons, right? Dano's point, I think, was different, which is don't get caught up in the label of running back. The value he brings is just 1,500 yards of instant offense, and that's what you're saying. Like, that has a production value that is significant, and people probably overlook.
JJ's back.
Kind of, yeah. I'm hearing you guys kind of sound like robots who just smoked 2 packs of cigarettes, but I can at least handle, like, I'll be able to give at least some takes, I think.
All right, running back 2. Let's go through the rest of the rankings here.
Yeah, so right now, look, I don't think that there's like an obvious RB2 at this point in the process. You know, like I said, I think draft capital can because if we're trying to project production here, draft capital will go a long way for a lot of these guys. And some of these guys, like, we don't know exactly who's going to be a day 2 guy versus a day 3 guy, and that definitely matters, you know, from the perspective of that production. Right now, my RB2 is Emmett Johnson. And the reason for that, you know, if you know Johnson and you know what I just said about the ZAP model and its emphasis on receiving, it's not that surprising. When you look at his best season in reception share, 94th percentile, adjusted yards per team play, 95th percentile, yards per team pass attempt, 89th percentile. Where he misses the mark is he didn't test as this like elite athlete, right? He had a 4.5, 6 or 9 or something, 40. So his speed score, so that's weight adjusted 40 time, wasn't very strong. That's the only thing that I really care about from a combine perspective is that speed score at the running back position. And that actually did translate to the data. And that's what's a little bit scary is that he's not the explosive long speed type running back. He's a pass catching archetype where we've seen this before, you know, where you know, you could argue a Kyron Williams is in this bucket to a degree. You could argue, I think that the high end comp, like the ceiling place where where Emmett Johnson could go is like Aaron Jones, you know, where the athleticism isn't off the charts, but the receiving skills are 100% there. And we've seen, like, I think Aaron Jones has been one of the most underrated receiving backs in the league over the last decade. And so we shouldn't assume that Emmett Johnson can reach that. I think like a more reasonable comp is more of like the Michael Carter, you know, Kenneth Gainwell, James White fell in the perfect spot for him to be ultra productive, right? You know, throughout his NFL career. But that's the kind of player that we're working with Emmett Johnson. It just is going to depend on, does he find a McVay coach that falls in love with him and is fine with giving him 200 plus carries the way that, you know, they've done with a Kyron Williams, who again is not the most like explosive dude in the world, but he can get it done on the ground. Like he's not a horrible running back. It's just that he's an all around guy and he's solid and he can do the job that they need him to do. And so I do think that the landing spot's going to be important for Johnson, but I think the receiving skill set's there. You know, he checks all of those boxes at the very least. And in this running back class, which is just not very good after Jeremiyah Love, I'll put Johnson there simply because of that receiving skill set.
That was what I was going to ask. How big of a gap do you think there is between Love and the rest of the running back class? Like we've been talking about, you know, the Felix Jones of the world, these guys that snuck back into the first round, but how much longer could we be waiting after Love is drafted before the next running back comes off the board?
I mean, look, from a mock draft standpoint, some people really like Jadarian Price. I can talk Price for a second here too, because he's my third running back at this moment. But I mean, the analytical profile, now, understandably so. He played behind Jeremiyah Love. So the numbers are not going to be unbelievably great. But, going back to what I said before, when I'm looking at these prospects, I'm trying to find concerns and red flags. And at the very least, I think we can all agree that there's just a massive amount of projecting that needs to go on for Jadarian Price at the next level, right? And so we're seeing Price sometimes mocked at the end of the first and into the second round. And I think that he's going to be a day 2 pick. With that being said, the analytical profile doesn't match up for that early, that kind of draft capital, And so I think there's a beyond massive size gap between Jeremiyah Love and the rest of the running back room. Jadarian Price, I think, is, obviously more of the consensus RB2 for a lot of people. I just have a lot of questions. He has a third percentile best season reception share. And here's the other thing. When you look at what others are saying, because I put together the prospect guide and I release it, and then I start to look at other takes, just to see what other people are saying. I try not to be influenced by that while I'm putting all of this together. And with Jadarian Price, what I've noticed is that a lot of the scouting reports on him reference, the long speed, the explosive plays, he's good on the ground, but there are question marks with his pass pro, and there are question marks of what he can do as a receiver. And so, in my opinion, that just makes this profile even more volatile than it otherwise would be. It's just the other problem that I had too is that Price came in at 203 pounds at the combine, which is a little bit lighter than what he was listed at. I think he was listed closer to like 209. And then he ran a 4.49, which was a little bit slower than I think a lot of people figured, especially when you try to match that with the explosive run rate that he had. And again, I am far from someone who's a sucker for the NFL combine. It's not, trust me, like you hear model, you hear like it's not that important for these guys overall. It's just one of the things that I'm looking at, to kind of create the narrative and story around a player. And so for Jadarian Price, the naturally the production profile is not there. I do have like a teammate score within the model that, if Jeremiyah Love goes top, it gets X draft capital that can impact Jadarian Price in a positive way. But we just don't have a historical comp since 2011 of a day 2 player running back with this kind of production profile and age-adjusted production profile, not only like in general, because his best season reception share was like under 3%, but also one that ended up being an ultra success at the NFL level. I told Steve this yesterday on my show, but the top comp that got spit out in the ZAP model for Jadarian Price was Ronald Jones. And so there's the second one was like Jordan Scarlett. Like it's just not the kind of Scarlett profile that I'm going to heavily buy into. And the reason why I have him at RB3 is quite simply, if a team invests in him, sure. In this draft class, sure. There's just not that much to love outside of outside of a guy like Jeremiyah Love.
Model comps are fun just for the old names that come up. Jordan Scarlett, man, that's great.
Yeah.
Go Gators. So Price is still third for you behind Emmett Johnson, despite some of the
I'll have
concerns?
Price 3 right now, but I look, that can change because part of the thing too is that like I'm gonna react to a little bit landing spot for sure, but like draft capital in general. And right now we just have this giant glob and blob of running backs who could go day 2 and could get better draft capital than we expected, like a Mike Washington after his combine. And if that happens, then things shift and change. I just kind of played it safe and said, I think Jadarian Price is going to have the safest draft capital of these guys. I just like Emmett Johnson and his skill set and some of the comps that pop up with a player like Johnson. Now, I fully recognize that Johnson could just be like a Tyler Bidet type. Like that's 100% in his range of outcomes. But again, we're picking from not the best running back. I mean, especially after last year. Last year we're talking about one of the best running back draft classes since 2017, and we had another good one in 2020. But it was a really good running back draft class. This is the complete opposite this year.
Cam Scadaboo would be RB2 in this class, by the way.
Yeah.
As I told you yesterday, JJ. What does the profile look like for Mike Washington? He's 5th on the consensus board right now, or 4th actually. Is he high for you? And how much does the combine actually get baked in because it was so extreme on the good end for him?
I think the combine matters for Mike Washington from a projected draft capital standpoint, which then would get fed into his potential volume early in his career, right? So that all plays together. So this guy crushes the combine, second best speed score behind Keith Marshall. There's another random guy behind Keith Marshall in the ZAP model database. That's weight adjusted 40 time. And so, yeah, the athleticism is there. I think that the athleticism showed up last year for Mike Washington. When you watch him, the previous years, I didn't think it was as strong. But the problem that I have with this kind of profile is that if it does, if Mike Washington does go like late round 4 or into round 5 or something, we get a lot of busts from like the overly athletic players that just clearly don't have the other traits that teams are looking for, at the position. Because like the other thing too is that the speed score didn't really translate to his, like I said, his career numbers. I thought it did last year. You could see a lot of that on the field, which is great. But if he had such a good speed score, why does he have a 22nd percentile explosive run rate? Why does he have a 16th percentile yards after contact per attempt rate? Why does he have a 12th percentile avoided tackles per attempt rate? So it does scream profile that could just be a gym rat profile and someone who's just naturally athletic and not necessarily someone who would translate. The top comp, I don't think this is a stylistic comp because this running back had a pretty particular upright style as he ran in the NFL. But the comp that did match pretty well was Latavius Murray. And I think it's not that I think he's that kind of runner per se. I do think from a production standpoint, though, we could see Mike Washington maybe like Latavius Murray, when he found the right spot, he was able to at least be productive. It wasn't like he was, some stud, but I think there's at least that opportunity for a player like Washington, but I'm not overly high, even after that crazy 40 time.
Is this a year that like breaks projection models because of the total dearth of talent at the running back position this year? You've got Jeremiyah Love and then basically nobody. It's almost like the Kenny Pickett quarterback year, except with one major difference, which is at running back in the NFL, so much of it is opportunity driven and just being put in the position to be a significant part within an offense, within a backfield. And there are teams that need running backs. Like some of these guys are going to get put into reasonable situations and get a reasonable share of a backfield just because there's a gap there and there's a job to be had and somebody's got to take it. So is this more of a crapshoot than normal? Because like data-wise, maybe none of these guys should get that opportunity, but maybe 3, 4, 5 of them are going to just because of the jobs open in the NFL.
100%. That's why, I keep going back to the draft capital piece, because if a team is going to give Jadarian Price a round 2, make him a round 2 pick, then he's probably going to get opportunity. Like any running back going to Seattle, we have to realize that even if the production profile is really weak, he's probably going to get some work because of the Charbonnet injury last year and the way this backfield looks right now. And so, yeah, I mean, like I'm going to be more reactive to draft capital than usual, probably for some of these players. I do think someone like, again, Emmett Johnson, like objectively in my eyes, probably the best production profile outside of Jeremiyah Love in this class. There's one more, the guy that I would talk about next, who I think, if I were to publish the guide today, I'd probably have him ranked a little bit higher than RB5. And it was Steve's RB2 and Jonah Coleman, who, if you do look at his production profile, 13% prorated best season reception share, that's 72nd percentile. Adjusted yards per team pass attempts, that's a receiving metric, 89th percentile. He's got that good mix of receiving profile while being a larger back, because he's a bowling ball, right? He's 5'8", like 220. And that's not necessarily a match that you always see with bigger bodied backs or guys who at least can do work between the tackles, is having that receiving work as well in their production profile. The problem with Coleman, and like when the prospect guide was launched and when my rankings were done, was essentially that like he was falling, likely for not testing certain tests that teams wanted him to do or whatever the case may be. He was falling a little bit. And again, I'm going to be tied more to draft capital within this class because there's not these like flawless profiles out there. But Jonah Coleman at least is a little bit interesting. And I think a lot of people probably make the comp, but it was a comp in the model as well of the late Doug Martin. It's the exact same frame. Like it's the same kind of frame. Martin was better production wise. I think he has more athleticism, but it's the same kind of style that you would be getting from a player like that.
And he's 23 at the moment. Is that correct? That'd be one of the knocks against him, Coleman.
Yep. And so like, that's the other thing too, is that age from a modeling standpoint right now is a little bit difficult because you get NIL stuff happening, you have transfer stuff happening, but then I still think there's a pretty big lag with the COVID season where that's not fully recognized yet. Like, I think that we're kind of at the peak of older guys coming out right now, and unks coming out, if you will. And then, over the next couple of years, that might slow down a little bit. We'll get a little bit more young and youth in these draft classes. But yeah, I mean, he's also a little bit older, which is a red flag.
I mean, there was the story going around that parents are keeping kids back either in middle school or in high school more, that they're going to do this going forward. This is not a new phenomenon.
No, not at all.
It's not new, but so like in baseball, if you were to get drafted your junior year and as soon as you're 22, 23, you are getting this, as the kids call, unk status. You're not a prospect anymore as soon as you're 22, 23. So it was not beneficial for you from a baseball perspective if you're trying to get drafted.
Right.
And in
it's
other
not
sports,
beneficial in the pros.
In professionally, this guy's 24. Like we all talk about these things, but because you can get paid in college,
right.
And everybody's like, well, Indiana was only good because they had 23 and 24-year-olds. Like because you can get paid in college, it is actually an advantage, and we might start seeing far more 19 and 20-year-old freshmen.
Well, there's always been a whole world of people that never really had the pros like in their sights. Like I remember watching.
They just wanted a scholarship.
Yeah, I remember watching a documentary like 15 years ago on Misillon High or whatever it's called, one of those big powerhouse Ohio, high schools, and they were saying the same thing. Like there were parents that were keeping kids back 1 year so that they would be a year bigger and stronger and faster, so that they had a shot of getting a scholarship to go play football at the next level, right? Because that was their only way out of wherever the hell they were in the middle of Ohio. That was the goal. It wasn't, to make it to the Indianapolis Colts in 5 years' time. It was just to get the hell out of here and get a scholarship to somewhere.
So there's probably more incentive. So it's really going to mess up the models, JJ, with age coming up soon here. Who's next, and are they the Penn State guys?
Yeah, they're the Penn State guys. I like Nick Singleton more than Kaytron Allen, and I don't think that that's probably surprising. Again, going back to the receiving stuff that I spoke to, Singleton has actually a pretty interesting analytical profile. Decent size combined with good receiving, probably a good speed score. Obviously, he hasn't been able to test because of that foot, but he's 87th percentile in adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt, which is kind of crazy because he split a backfield throughout his collegiate career with Allen, another NFLer. But Allen obviously being more of that bruiser and them using and deploying Singleton more as the receiving back. Most of his advanced numbers, though, are pretty weak. And that's where I have more hesitation. And we've seen this kind of archetype before where some of the missed tackles forced and yards after contact numbers aren't necessarily phenomenal while being more than likely a good athlete and a bigger bodied guy who can catch passes or did catch passes at the collegiate level. This screams like CJ Procise to me, or even maybe if you want to get a little bit better than that, like a Tevin Coleman type prospect where, again, the athleticism is probably there. The size is there. He looks like a prototypical should work in the NFL kind of player, but there's just something missing. And that's what we've seen from some of the comps that got spit out for Singleton. But again, I'll take a chance in this kind of draft class on at least I think there is some upside within Singleton.
Before we talk Allen, really quick, you know how they always say, guys can just sit there and name players for hours? Full show. We just do that.
Yeah. That'd be fun. Yeah.
Full show, name game. We get like Nate Tice would be great at it.
Yeah.
We'll get like 10 of us.
And
we just have like a big Zoom screen and we just go around and we're all like CJ Procise. Just blowing our mind on the names that we pull out here.
And it would have to be like, each name prompts the next one.
Oh, it's got to, you use the first letter of the last name.
Not the first letter, but
it's got to be somebody similar or in the same time frame?
Just the logic to it, right? Like LaDainian Tomlinson leads you to Lorenzo Neal, leads you to Mike Allstott. You know what I mean? There'd have to be like a sequence that made sense to follow.
I am not joking. This is a June episode of us. We're gonna get people that want to just name players for an hour, and it's gonna be awesome.
Okay,
we're doing it. Singleton was a frustrating player not even frustrating because former 5-star, very good athlete, as you were saying, JJ. He does catch the ball well out of the backfield. He's got some great plays in the pass game and as a kick returner. I don't love him running zone scheme. I don't think he's got a good feel as a running back, and he never, as a guy that was extremely talented, 5-star athlete, big, just never developed skills as a runner other than he follows his blocks pretty well. But he's got good burst, home run, hitting speed. The Tevin Coleman comp makes a lot of sense, right? Like size, speed, but just overall running ability was a question. But can you get some pass game? So it's interesting that the model, because of the receiving ability bumps him up a little bit. And then I would say as a pure runner, there's a reason why Kaytron Allen, who I think the Penn State people endearingly called him fat or fat boy or something like that, like not even close to the same athlete as Singleton, but he was stealing carries like crazy.
Doesn't sound that endearing.
I mean, I gotta fact check that on myself, but they're not the same type of player. But Kaytron Allen kept stealing carries from Singleton, who's clearly the more talented player.
Yeah, I mean, look, with Kaytron Allen, again, this goes back to the draft capital stuff I was talking about earlier and how it usually will capture rushing production. So, like, if Singleton ends up going earlier than expected, then that's a signal for me to say, oh, a team might want to deploy him more as an early down guy that we not necessarily projected originally. And then Kaytron Allen, I mean, this is just a profile that just doesn't usually do it for me much because the receiving side didn't really exist. He was prolific on the ground, and so his adjusted yards per team play was strong, 70th percentile. That's in a shared backfield. That's pretty good. But again, if you look at guys who, this is semi-threshold analysis, but I think it at least paints the picture. Sub 10% best season reception share with a sub 0.6 receiving yards per team pass attempt adjusted. He was well below those marks. So this isn't just saying like, oh, he was at those marks. Let's look at all the guys who are worse. But of that group in the model database who were below those marks, there's over 170 of them. Only 7 of them managed to be relevant from a production standpoint in any way, shape, or form. And the guys that we get are like, Alfred Morris was one, Andre Ellington. We'll talk about naming some guys. Andre Ellington, CJ Anderson, Carlos Hyde, Jordan Howard, Chris Carson, and Isaiah Pacheco were those 7 players. So
maybe we do it right now. Like, just name all the comps. I'll name a player and you name all the comps.
So this is a list of like good players that had no business being in the NFL athletic wise. Like we were just talking about CJ Anderson the other day. Like this guy who literally is just, you see the state of him now. He's just like, there's no way. Like if you saw CJ Anderson walking down the street, you would never imagine that guy was like a difference maker in a Super Bowl. No. And yet for like a hot minute, CJ Anderson was the reason Denver was winning games.
He was incredible.
Yeah.
He was incredible.
Yeah. So like, I don't think like I see Kaytron Allen as like an older Kendre Miller. Because Kendre Miller was young when he came out. He just didn't have much of a receiving prowess, and that wasn't there, for him. And so, like, I think the more probably median outcome is like Wayne Gallman for Kaytron Allen. Like, I think he can be a bruiser. He can be thrown in there if need be in a 1 or 2 game sample. But I don't know if Allen is going to be a sustained player unless the depth chart on his team is just really, really weak.
Are we up to? He was named Fat Man, by the way, by his mom at birth. So it wasn't necessarily because he, was fat at Penn State. This is a lifelong nickname, just so we're clear. But the guy named Fat Man was stealing a lot of carries from Nick Singleton. So that was true. Are we up to 8 now? Let's just round it out. Top 10. Who else is remaining in the running back rankings here in the top 10?
Yeah, I'll just go over a few real quick. I think Seth McGowan, we talked about him, Steve, yesterday. I think he's a pretty interesting prospect. The problem is his age. I mean, he's just old. Like he's been around for a while. There's some reports of his, like, this is the crazy part with these players that like birthdays are not consistent from one source to the next. But the source that I was using that seemed right is that he's 25. Like he's already that old entering the NFL. That's a huge problem. And from a comp standpoint, he got like Dwayne Washington, Keontae Ingram, but then one of them was David Johnson. And I'm like, whoa, okay, this is kind of interesting. If you get an athletic player who could do it all, at least in a short period of time in the NFL, he did in David Johnson. And you look at you sort of open the hood, 74th percentile in adjusted yards per team pass attempt. He had an 85th percentile best season reception share. But like Mike Washington, which they were teammates at one point, but like Mike Washington, he had a faster 40 for his size. He had a good speed score, but all the advanced metrics, they're just from a career standpoint, they just didn't match up to that athletic profile. And so I think Washington, because of the love that he got out of the combine and because a lot of people are now throwing him out there as a sleeper and a team might fall in love with him more. And he's a little bit younger too, which is big. And so he would get the better draft capital, which is why I'd have McGowan ranked below, but again, we'll see where, like, I would be shocked out of my mind if Seth McGowan had day 2 draft capital, whereas if Mike Washington did, I wouldn't be that surprised. Right now with McGowan, I think he's an interesting dart. Just recognize that, he's older. You have Damon Claiborne is another one, pass catching specialist, but we're starting to get into not getting a lot of work territory. He's a receiving specialist. He's undersized. He's sub 190. If I'm being honest, I think that Des Reed out of Pitt, my alma mater, so try not to be biased here, but Des Reed is kind of a more interesting prospect. He's only like 170 pounds. Like, he's very, very small. But the problem with Reed, aside from size, he comps very closely to a guy like Tariq Cohen, right? And it worked for Cohen in that era of NFL. And the fear, I think, with Des Reed is back in 2017, teams are peppering running backs a lot more through the air, and they're able to get them in space a lot more, especially with the spread offense, the way that all worked. Now you're getting a lot more of these heavy packages, and I don't think a player like Reed is going to necessarily fit into that as well or as easily and seamlessly. You can make the argument for Damon Claiborne too. I just think there's a little bit more upside on the ground for him, which is why I have him ranked ahead at the moment. But both guys, are not likely to be super, super productive. And then two more to call out is like the Swiss Army knife types. Eli Heidenreich went to the combine as a running back, but I think he's more of like a slot type player, at the next level. But his numbers were out of control when you talk about market share, out of control because of where he played. These
at Navy.
Yeah, right. And it's just like, it's crazy. Like, he had better reception share numbers than like Christian McCaffrey did because they just didn't throw that much. And when they did, he was just their entire offense. And so model wise, you have to adjust for that and fix that and make sure that it's not getting out of hand. But I do think in a class that doesn't have these obvious, good players, and I know that I sound like a broken record at this point, Heidenreich at least has some skill set that you can't find very easily throughout the class. Now, again, I think he's more wide receiver than he is running back, but I at least wanted to throw him out there. And then the other one who's kind of interesting is Adam Randall, just because, again, converted wide receiver. He's huge, 6'3", 232, had a decent 40 at the combine. His production profile, though, is absolute crap. I mean, it's horrible. It's not. And I made the argument, or you can make the argument that, he hasn't played running back very long, and so you can give him a little bit of a shot and a little bit of leeway there. But he's at least someone to keep an eye on, just because, again, the class overall is pretty weak.
Yeah, Randall converted to running back pretty late in the process. Did Brashard Smith look good in your model last year, or how much did you have to adjust for his wide receiver adjustment to running back?
Yeah, so it's funny because like Randall's receiving profile actually is terrible, and so like that's a problem, right? But like you look at other converted guys, Brashard Smith, Tyrone Tracy, they both looked good in the model because they were receivers. But again, I'm going to let draft capital then dictate what I think that player might be able to do from a production standpoint on the ground. And so obviously, Smith and Tracy going later, the models still like them more than like where I have this metric called draft capital delta, which looks at where the player was drafted, looks at the model and just says, okay, the model likes this player more than what NFL teams did in the NFL draft and vice versa. And both those guys had positive draft capital deltas. I bought into the Brashard Smith hype a little bit last year, I'm not going to lie. And
Same.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a fun prospect. It's a low cost prospect, right? And so like, why not? I don't think that Randall is that player, but it's the same kind of idea of it's unique. It's different. So why not take a chance if you're in the seventh round or like an undrafted guy?
Yeah, I mean, Brashard Smith, even after he got drafted, you could easily make the case and say, well, there's nobody. I mean, you're talking,
right.
A Kareem Hunt who looks like he's running a 5.3 right now, and Pacheco. It's like, well, nobody has what Brashard Smith has. Surely he'll see the field for the Chiefs.
Surely.
Who love speed and playmaking, and it just never really materialized. And every time it was like, all right, it's week 8. Now they're going to fix their offense. Brashard Smith carries are coming, and it just never really came together for him last year. But
yeah,
still early. Well, JJ, this has been great. I love it. I love the approach that you're taking analytically. Appreciate you giving a different angle than because we take an analytical angle, but not always. You're doing it in a different way than we are, which is fun. Tell everybody where they can find the guide, all the work you're doing, and we're definitely going to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I would love to. Love both of your work as well. Over on lateround.com, check it out. You got the podcast, got the prospect guide. If you like nerdy stuff, I'm also very transparent about the process. Like, you can look at what goes into the model. I don't want to hide from that because I think it's really important to not hide from that. So you can look at all the metrics that are in there and stuff. So if you want to get pretty nerdy with it, check it out, lateround.com.
Awesome. Sounds great. Everybody go check it out. JJ, appreciate it, man. We'll do it again, like I said.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
That was great. I want to react.
Okay.
In a minute. But we're going to start with a true or false question.
No.
Incognito mode makes you invisible on the internet. The answer? False. Most people have no idea, but your browsing history can be monitored and recorded by bad actors unless you use ExpressVPN. When you connect to an unencrypted network in cafes, airports, hotels, on the train, your online data, it's exposed to hackers who steal your passwords, bank logins, credit card details, and more. ExpressVPN creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. It works on all devices, phone, laptop, tablets, and more. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making it extremely difficult for third parties to track online activity. And it's easy to use. You just fire up the app and click one button to get protected. Offered at their lowest price ever now. You get plans that start at $3.49 a month. That's literally about 12 cents a day, rated number one by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/CTM. That's EXPRESSVPN.com/CTM to find out how you can get up to 4 extra months. expressvpn.com/CTM. I really enjoyed that discussion. I'm upset we had some tech difficulties in the middle because we couldn't tell how much he could really hear at one point. But I like the process that he has there. And, again, he's doing something a little bit different, saying, I want to know how many fantasy points this guy's going to bring to the table. But at the end of the day, that's production.
Right.
And he has a process before. The draft capital thing is like, all right, this is information from a fantasy perspective that you're allowed to use. Obviously, from a team building perspective, you can't. You're the one dictating that. But all the other data that goes into it is really informative. And I think using data like that is a really good complement to the eye test, the scouting test. So you pair the scouting report with the production profile, the way it's broken down. And I think when you land, like everybody agrees on Jeremiyah Love, those are good things when they all converge in the same area.
Yeah. I think any kind of robust statistical profiling for a player is a good part of the puzzle to have. And then, as he says himself, you got to then go look at tape, add that element, and it's all pieces of the puzzle.
And just to touch on some of the running backs that we talked about, I do like Jonah Coleman from Washington. He's tough to tackle, 5'9", 228. There are questions about him from a speed perspective, but he's not. We said the same thing about David Montgomery. Like, this guy's great up to 15 yards.
Right.
And by the way, Montgomery all of a sudden is rattling off 70-yarders when given the opportunity to take it to the house. But Coleman's one of those guys who's probably good up to 15 to 20 yards. Said the same thing about Scadaboo last year. Just good runner, avoids tackles, smooth athlete. The age thing, to reiterate, the age thing doesn't mean, well, his second contract is at 27. A lot of it means what you see right now from this player is a 22 or 23-year-old against mostly younger players. That affects your perception, so you got to factor that in. Maybe there's less growth ability.
And what JJ was saying, that that kind of early market share thing it's a proxy for talent. Like, if it took you several years to be noticed to the point where they're feeding you targets, that's probably in itself a flag that you might not be that talented. Whereas if you were immediately, we need to get the ball in the hands of this 18-year-old, that signal.
Yeah, and so I think all that information is useful. I haven't always thought about that information until the last 8 to 10 years. Hearing some of these different angles that you just hadn't thought about. I think it's all good information to use. The Singleton discussion at Penn State. I think he is a good smooth receiver. He made an incredible play in one game where he had a chip block and then caught a pass, caught the game-winning touchdown. Like, he's got some talent and some skills and home run ability, just the natural running ability and ability to set up blocks, zone scheme, vision, the whole thing. Like, that part's missing, and that's why when he said Tevin Coleman, do you remember Coleman? Didn't he run like 4 threes and that's a good size 4.3, and it's like, this is, we love this, but it just never came together.
He was the guy for years that a bunch of sort of Twitter people were like, why does Tevin Coleman not get 8x the amount of work he's getting, and why is he not broken out yet? It's like, 'cause there's something missing.
And then Eli Heidenreich from Navy, Shrine Bowl, Eric Galko, the guy who runs the Shrine Bowl, the director, loved Heidenreich. Like, early in the season, he was all over him, and he was a hybrid player in the Navy triple option scheme. So he played a little slot. He played slot back. So it was like slot back and receiver. And so that's what, I mean, as JJ was saying, it screws up all the numbers.
Yes.
But he's a really good athlete. He runs pretty good routes. Don't know exactly what he is. He's like when the Percy Harvin types would come out, the hybrid slot running back type of player. That's what he is. So TBD as to what he is. But if he's in running back rankings, it's a unique player to look at. If he's in receiver rankings, he's a late round slot receiver type, fascinating player. But in a weak class, just somebody that is notable. And my numbers also like Desmond Reed from Pittsburgh. He's just tiny, 170 pounds. So between him, I think he's a better, like Damon Claiborne is like a jitterbug type, but I think Desmond Reed's a better pure player. He was a really productive player at Pittsburgh. He's just really small.
Yeah. This does feel like an entire draft full of, like, there's going to be 5 Philip Lindsays from this draft. And by that, I mean like 5 people that randomly have like 1,100 yards for a season and then disappear because they were probably never actually that good, but opportunities were there for 5 people to have that kind of workload.
Yes. I think you could see that. Or these guys just aren't going to get a chance because
there's that too.
Because
what
of
if it's just a Kenny Pickett year where only Jeremiyah Love is good and everybody else just never even factors
because of where resources went in free agency and the whole thing.
I just think because the NFL, because it's so opportunity driven now. Like if you again Seattle, like who almost regardless of what running back lands in Seattle, they're going to have to get some kind of decent workload. And if the offensive line is playing reasonably well, then they're going to get some production just because that's the bigger striver.
Anyway, I enjoyed the discussion. I enjoy all of those discussions, that type of back and forth. And I like the differences between having Greg Cosell yesterday coming at it from
pure tape guy.
Pure tape, film angle, can't really make projections. I don't know. I'm just going to tell you what I see. And JJ doing it more from a data perspective with an eye test as well. Mm-hmm. I love it. Trying to get as many angles as we can here during draft season.
All different perspectives.
All right. We had some news yesterday, and then we're going to hit some mailbag, and we'll get out of here. The Cleveland Browns have modified Myles Garrett's contract.
Modified. Good word.
How's that?
For this. Yeah.
It's just modified. Previously called for option bonuses in 2026, 27, and 28 to be exercised on the 15th day of the league year. In the amended terms, that date has been pushed back to 7 days before the regular season each year. And so, end of the day, it just makes him more tradable.
Yes.
And it happens to coincide with the Browns petitioning the league or presenting an option for the league to allow the trading of first-round picks up to 5 years out rather than 3 years out, ironically.
Yes. It's curious because it makes Myles Garrett's contract significantly more tradable, but Myles Garrett has a no-trade clause in his contract. So he would obviously have to be involved in any trade that occurred. On the other hand, you wouldn't imagine his list of options would be particularly short, right? So it's not. I don't think a no-trade clause in Myles Garrett's contract means he's not going to get traded. It just means that he's going to have to sign off on where he goes. And I would imagine there's going to be plenty of contenders willing to trade for Myles Garrett. I mean, if Baltimore was willing to give up 2 first-round draft picks for Max Crosby, albeit to then back out once they looked at his knee, you wouldn't imagine there would be a shortage of teams who Myles Garrett would be amenable to going to that would throw draft picks in Cleveland's way.
He is the best non-quarterback in the league.
Yep.
He's the most impactful non-quarterback in the league.
Yep. Now the risk is
the age.
He's 30. December 29th is his birthday, so he'll be 31 at the end of the year. It's not like that's too old, but it's just when you're talking about giving up the kind of trade picks you would need to give up to get Myles Garrett, that's when you start to wonder how long of Myles Garrett are we getting.
And it goes back to the old football adage: you'd rather get rid of a guy a year early rather than a year late.
Particularly again, like this was supposed to be the year the Browns found the quarterback. If they're looking around, they're like, there isn't one. It's next year. It's another year of Myles Garrett, burning another year. Then he's 31, going on 32, and you're like, is he ever like? They have got to be asking themselves at this point: are we going to have a quarterback before Myles Garrett is done? Right. And if the answer to that is no, well, then we should trade Myles Garrett for like 3 first-round draft picks right now because we'll never get that opportunity again.
Especially because, remember last year at this time, I loved the Browns trade.
Yes.
When they traded.
I think it was a good process, and I think they've been very unlucky by the way it's panned out.
And part of the thought process was you're giving up 2. You're still getting Mason Graham at 6, who's going to be a very good player, and I thought had a good rookie season. You get the extra first-rounder this year, and theoretically – there'd be more quarterbacks available. There are not. Now, theoretically, there'll be more quarterbacks available next year. So the Browns are sitting there with 2 1s this year. But their competitors for a quarterback next year, like the Jets, have 3 first-rounders. So if you're the Browns and you're like, listen, we have no way of getting a quarterback this year, and then next year we can't just roll in there with a top 10 pick. The Jets might be a worse team than us, and they also have 3 1s total. Mm-hmm. Their only way to play this game, like we could be going into next year and all the QB needy teams are just finagling their draft picks and like, well, I've got 3 1s and I've got 3 1s. So the only way the Browns could turn their franchise around is with some semblance of a quarterback. And if they're not going to be good this year and Myles Garrett's upset again being on a bad team, you're selling them pretty high. And if you can get a 1 for next year, you can at least play in this game of trying to get your quarterback.
But also, I mean, I think it's less positioning yourself for a quarterback and more. I mean, look, if Myles Garrett's going to be upset and the timelines are just not going to coincide, like he's one of the most valuable assets in the NFL in terms of tradable. Like if you've looked at it and you're like, the best case scenario is we find a quarterback next year, at which point Myles Garrett will be 31 going on 32. Let's say it takes that guy at least a year to be competitive. Then Myles Garrett's 32 going on 33. You know what I mean? Like the timeline is just not going to sync. Like we're going to have literally wasted Myles Garrett's entire career, and the point where we finally have a quarterback that's capable of winning, Myles Garrett will now be declining, and we've just blown the opportunity. From their perspective, it's better to be like, okay, Myles Garrett's been a great servant. On the other hand, we could get 3 first-round picks for him right now. Let's just trade him. Okay, that helps us potentially get the quarterback. But more importantly, it gets us the assets, and then we can coincide the timelines of everybody. By the time we get the quarterback,
the timeline
we can also have a bunch of other talent getting better at the same time.
For sure. And then they'd be sitting on – they had one of the best drafts last year. You could say, oh, they sucked at Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders at quarterback. No, they took a shot in the 3rd and the 5th on 2 quarterbacks, okay? Fine. Every other draft pick was pretty good. They didn't have many, but the other ones were good. The 2 running backs, the linebacker, Schwesinger. They drafted well. Yeah. Mason Graham, good player. So you add that, 2 firsts this year, whatever you get for Garrett, then you're starting to build the young nucleus. And look, I know this might be like, oh my gosh, we've been saying this since 95 for the Browns. It's just where they are right now. They're the Deshaun Watson contract in draft picks surrendered.
Yeah.
Absolutely depleted this roster. They went from one of the best, most dependable offensive lines to they had to replace all 5 starters this offseason. It's just where they are.
So I heard the first good argument for that 5-year trade proposal that the Browns put in. The idea of being able to trade draft picks 5 years in advance instead of 3. Our guy, Chris Rings, who's a listener, tweeted it at us.
A listener, and he's got the awesome studio
setup. For a draft. So the general, the logic that a lot of people are like, well, if you let teams trade 5 years in advance, think how badly they could screw up the franchise, right? If you do the Deshaun Watson contract with interest, or the Deshaun Watson trade with interest and with 5 years instead of 3, you can ruin a team for a decade with one bad move, right? The flip side of that is, what if you used the 5-year, what if the value didn't go up in terms of how much you would give up, but what you did is spread out the negative impact for something you screw up? So instead of, one of the reasons the Deshaun Watson thing has been so bad is because you cough up 3 consecutive first-round draft picks. What if you gave up the same 3 first-round picks, but you spread them over 5 years instead? So you've still made a mess. You've still screwed it up. You're still losing a ton of draft capital, but it's every other year you get stung without a first-round pick, whereas you get 2 in the middle that you can try and insulate yourself from the damage you caused. That, I think, is a reasonable point to make. Now, the problem is I don't know that you can entrust a team to do that. That's great in theory, and the smart teams might insulate themselves that way, but would a dumb team just go, well, what if we gave you 4 consecutive first-round draft picks?
How many GMs have the job security to get a pick 4 and 5 years out? That's the other end of it, though, too.
Yeah, I just think
the only people might be if the Jones family is like, well, we'll be running the Cowboys in perpetuity here. So, do they take? They don't always take the long-term approach. Howie knows when he's going to think about retirement. Like how Les Snead. There's 5 teams in the league who could feel decent enough about their situation. You probably could have said the same thing about Bill Belichick in 2018. Oh, he'll be here forever. He was out within 4 years, So it's really difficult to say, give me that pick 5 years out.
I think there are teams that might want it. I just think the market forces would push teams towards the bad side of that than the good side. Like, I think the market forces would push teams into trading a higher volume of assets as opposed to let's use this extra flexibility to insulate ourselves from bad decisions. Like, I think those are two sides of the same coin, and I think it would end up landing heads almost all the time, which is why I still think it's a bad idea.
Anyways, notable. Could be more excitement here this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, dude, if Myles Garrett gets moved in a trade, that would be one of the most monster moves to happen in the NFL in years. I mean, again, he's arguably the best player, period, in football. Just plays at a position that's less valuable than quarterback.
But is right there with it.
Right, but if you moved the best player in the game in an offseason, that's a pretty seismic shift.
All right, we got some mailbag questions to get to here. You ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
This is from Franklin. Something I've noticed almost every year, 2024 being the exception, in the last half dozen years or so, is that despite everyone talking a big game about how high round one quarterbacks will go, it usually doesn't happen. My theory is that there is double counting. The QB bump does exist to some degree, but most analysts overrate QB prospects or QBs as prospects to begin with. For example, in 2022, Malik Willis was the consensus prospect at number 10, Kenny Pickett at 15. Above guys they had no business being over, then the quarterbacks fall relative to consensus, and everybody acts shocked and surprised when the analysts were the ones who initiated the problem in the first place. Almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy type of deal. Your thoughts, Samuel Monson and Stephen Palazzolo from Franklin?
Yeah.
Is there groupthink around this QB ranking system, essentially?
There is, but I also don't think it's true to say it usually doesn't happen.
You said outside of what year?
There was definitely a couple of years.
24 when JJ and everybody went.
The Kenny Pickett year was the most obvious example where it's like everyone assumed that felt like the running back year this year, where outside of Jeremiyah Love. Like, literally, we were talking to people in the NFL, and they're like, honestly, none of these guys. Like, there is no starting quarterback in this draft. But if I had to gamble on one of them, it would be Kenny Pickett, right? And you're like, eh. Whereas we were like, if you had to gamble on one of these guys, Malik Willis has got more upside. Is he the guy? Whatever. We assumed that because teams need quarterbacks and, some of them are going to go high because teams need quarterbacks. And it's that world where if you take a guy on day one, he's a starter. If you don't take a guy on day one, he's probably not. And ultimately, the NFL basically decided, you know what, literally none of these guys are capable of starting. The Steelers desperately needed a quarterback, so they drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round. If they hadn't, who knows how far he would have slid. Maybe the first quarterback off the board would have been in the third round. But that was the 1 year where it didn't happen. But then you get, like, Anthony Richardson being drafted 4th overall with a resume that had no business being there. Quarterbacks, I do think, tend to get pushed up higher than in the year 2024, where we're like, there's 6 quarterbacks, but 2 of them are probably day 2 guys, and then all of them, like, they go in the first 12 picks.
We thought Knicks and Penix would be back end of the first or closer to the second. Going into the draft, I don't know where they were consensus-wise, but they were
similar. They were 28 and 32 or something.
Yeah.
Like, they were, and they end up going, like, 6 of them in the first 12 picks. So, and Michael Penix not being a fringe first rounder, but going 8 overall. Like,
I think the way I would position this, to answer Franklin's question, though, is I think the consensus board for the quarterback is the most useless usage of the consensus board. Because I think you're pulling from people who are just doing a lot of different things. Sometimes they're ranking in a vacuum. Sometimes they are artificially bumping up the quarterback. I think because if you say, oh, Bo Nix was 32 on the consensus board, that's a reach at 12. Well, he's the quarterback, so it's not. If you take a pass rusher at 12, that's 32 on the consensus board. You could legitimately say that's bad process, right? That guy should not be going that high. But with quarterback, I don't think it applies. So I almost wouldn't even use the consensus because I don't think the inputs are great, but I also think the outputs are just not matching what you're trying to
quarterback
capture.
Changes everything in the NFL. Like, it changes the math for trades, it changes contract value, it changes everything. It also messes up the consensus and the draft status thing the most, in part because of what I'm saying, that I think quarterbacks every year is seen as like a binary thing in the draft. Is this guy a starter? Yes or no. If he is, he's probably going in the first round, like projected. Do you think he's a starter? If he is, you take him in the first round. If he's not, you probably don't take him until the third round. And then there's just gradations of how good a backup is this guy, right? And that's 3 through 7. And so there's a ton of drafts. Like the 2018 draft, you had, 5 quarterbacks in the first round? Baker, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Lamar Jackson, who am I missing? Sam Darnold. But then nobody got taken until the third for Mason Rudolph, who was seen as like the best backup, essentially, of the group, right? And that was like the Kenny Pickett year. Kenny Pickett, all right, fine, one of these guys maybe you can work out as a starter. After that, nobody till the third. There are second-round quarterbacks, but I think they're becoming rarer and rarer. And now you're just seeing this delineation between, like, the Bryce Young year as well. Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson. We thought Will Levis would go in the first. He slipped. He goes just at the top of the second, and then you get the gap to the third-round guys, to the Hendon Hookers of the world, where it's like you're a backup, developmental, whatever. So
Hendon was a rumored first-rounder as well.
Right, but so that's the thing. It's like all it would have taken was one team to see him as a starter long-term, and he goes in the first. Right? Nobody did, so he goes in the third.
I made that point before. I would say Tim Tebow for the rest of his life.
Right. Would have been a third-round pick from almost everybody.
He is a first-round quarterback because one team took him.
Because Josh McDaniels is like, I like this kid's moxie.
No one expected him to go there. So I don't know. I think it comes down to a combination of I have the beholder, aka the individual evaluations, and
like it takes a slightly weird set of circumstances to get the Tyler Shucks of the world, right? That second-round quarterback where you don't love the first-round guys, your picks, whatever, don't line up for the third-round thing, or pressure is elsewhere, and so you grab the guy in the second round. But generally speaking, it's first-round quarterback, guy's going to start, and then third round and beyond, the guy is a career backup with varying degrees of like potential to be something different.
All right, we got one from Ken. It says, hi, guys. Love the show. A while back, you mentioned that you thought the best course of action for the Texans at quarterback was to ride out C.J. Stroud's 5th year before committing to anything. Did we say that? Probably.
Yeah.
Do you think they should bake that into their draft strategy for next year? Should they be moving some assets from this year to next so that if Stroud doesn't work out, they'll have more draft capital to move up and get a quarterback again from Ken? Thoughts on that?
I think generally, I think in a year where you don't love the draft class, you should always be trying to kick into next year if you think it's a better draft anyway. So I would take that as a general approach that next year's a better draft. Let's try and get more assets in next year's draft than this year's draft.
All these decisions are really tricky because first off, from a quarterback perspective, you got to play the psychology game too. Like if you don't show confidence in C.J. Stroud and you ride it out as we suggested, are you all of a sudden killing his confidence?
You're becoming more and more of a touchy-feely guy over the years.
I am.
You've been railing against that. Nah, screw those guys. If they can't handle it, they're not the guy. And now you're like,
kids
you
grow,
don't want to upset CJ.
Maybe it's my kids.
Yeah.
I'm just not as hard line here. But more so, I would say, when you're a team like the Texans who has finished in the Elite Eight, Final Eight, 3 straight years, you're on this, like if you're Nick Caserio, you're like, how do we get over the hump? How are we getting to a championship game? How are we getting to a Super Bowl? What are the missing pieces? He's trying to do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's got some level of security and a really good foundation. And if you can take more of a long-term approach, like you're saying, if you're picking in the back end of the first, if you could trade out and get, a first rounder for next year and set yourself up, it's probably the best move. But it's also tricky when you're saying, we're so close, and you're balancing short-term and long-term.
I mean, I think generally just because it's a better draft, they should be trying to get draft capital next year as opposed to this year. But I think that applies to all 32 teams in the NFL. Yeah. I don't think that there's a good way of pivoting from C.J. Stroud if they decide that things are going south. Like, I don't think you can future plan that now because I think if and when it happens, no matter how Stroud plays, unless you get 17 games of the last 2 playoff games, which feels unlikely, but almost no matter how he plays, this team will be too good for them to be replacing him with a top 3 draft pick next year, right? So even if you trade out of this year's first round, you pick up next year's first round, you need to get lucky that first round pick comes from a team that ends up bad enough that it's high enough. Like if you end up with your own pick, which is, let's say, 22, right, in next year's draft, which optimistically is 22, and then you've traded for someone else's first round pick, let's say that's 10. You got 10 and 22 going up against the Jets with their 3 first-round picks, one of which might be like number 1 overall, right? Or number 2 overall. Like I don't think they can assemble the kind of draft capital that ensures they get a quarterback next year.
But it's not. There's supposed to be. It's not just one Arch Manning. It's not
I know. But there's always like.
But there could be 3 or 4, and you're trying to get one of those.
There could be, but there's also usually, somebody posted a list recently of the QB that goes number 2 in every draft. It's not a good list, right? Including like C.J. Stroud is the best name on it, and you're like, So my point being, if you want your new quarterback, sure, you can let's position ourselves for one of the guys in this draft, and but you really want the first guy. You really want your pick of the quarterbacks next year, and there's basically no way the Texans can ensure that. So, and they're too good a team. Like I think they basically just have to hope that C.J. Stroud works out, and if he doesn't, that's a problem for another day, and we have bigger issues than did we maximize trade value. Like you're boned. If C.J. Stroud didn't work out, you now don't have a quarterback, and you're in trouble the same way the rest of the NFL that doesn't have a quarterback is. I don't think there's necessarily a way of planning for that now.
Yeah, you're not necessarily planning for that, but
what you're trying to do, in my opinion, is minimize the damage. You're trying to, which is why you ride out his 5th year. You're basically, we don't trust him 100% right now, so let's not saddle ourselves to the kind of contract that ruins us for 3 years if and when he doesn't work out.
I am softening.
Let's just play for a year and then see.
I am softening. I'm like, don't make CJ sad. What if CJ's sad and he keeps throwing to the defense?
Look, how much happier can you make him? You've given him all these Iowa State wide receivers. Buy
what
he
needs?
Some donuts, do whatever you need.
He needs Tank back.
He does.
He needs Tank Dell
Everybody
back.
needs Tank Dell.
Everybody needs. If Tank Dell comes back, they're my Super Bowl pick. If he comes back healthy,
What was
if
he
I
doing
can
recently? Was he doing like fireman's carries or something? There's some little video of him working out.
If I could get the crisscross applesauce move that he made at the line of scrimmage in the Senior Bowl, if he could show that, then they're going to the Super Bowl.
I think he was doing fireman's carries with something, right? And it's like his legs look like arms.
It's not great.
Now I think they always have, but it's still like Can we not get him on some like quad extensions or something? Like we can't make them any bigger than that.
He could do whatever I did to my knee that completely swelled up my entire leg.
Like honestly, his leg, I genuinely think has less size to it than your arm.
Great.
That feels suboptimal for an NFL wide receiver.
All right. Appreciate the mailbag questions. Check the mic at the33rdteam.com. All right. The tournament's here. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get up to $300 back in bonus bets every day for 10 days. Here's how it works. You place a tournament bet using the token. If it doesn't work, you'll get up to $300 back in bonus bets every single day for 10 straight days. That's 10 chances to play all tourney long, from game props and money lines to spreads, totals, futures, and much more. You can even mix things up with same-game parlays for a shot at a bigger payout. However, you want to fill out your bracket, whatever you want to do. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the action day after day. So visit FanDuel.com/33rd to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com/33rd to get in on the action. It's in 21 plus states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, 18 plus in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. Bonus bets are non-withdrawable and expire 7 days after receipt. Tokens are received in increments of 1 per day. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York, and call 1-877-770-7867 in Louisiana. All right, we've got one shouty show-ish draft take that we need to respond to. So let's get
I've thought about it very deeply.
I liked how he started it with, I've thought about this long and hard.
I trust the backup quarterback more than I do Dak.
This is why Skip Bayless is the master of the shouty show segment.
I can't do it anymore. It is year 6.
It's just a never-ending arms race of idiocy between loud, obnoxious people. We are the antidote to that.
To be clear up front here, I'm going to say I don't believe this is a shouty show take that we're going to respond to. It's just the take of the week.
Well, it's a take from a shouty show.
It's from a shouty show, but it's one that we need to respond to. But I want to preface this by saying I don't believe this is in the genre, so to speak. I think it's a fair
you don't want to make Dano sadder than he already is.
Well, you guys have taken a lot of heat in the last few months. You and Dan.
Dano, yeah.
So
it's that thing of, every day there's principal character on Twitter. Your job is to not be it. I was it for a day, and Dano has been it for a day.
All right, let's hear what he had to say about Ty Simpson.
Ty Simpson has been a fascinating person in this draft, going back to the middle part of the season where he seemed to be trending towards QB1.
Yeah.
And then the season went on, and there became no question that Fernando Mendoza is going to be the first quarterback taken in this draft. Certainly that is at least the conventional wisdom, and Ty Simpson could fall anywhere in the first round. You have looked at the tapes. What are you seeing?
I think Ty Simpson is QB1. I think Ty Simpson is the best quarterback in this class. I think when you look at the body of work and what was asked of these two quarterbacks, you have to start with the question, who needed to do more to carry their football team to play well? Ty Simpson, and it's not close between those two quarterbacks. Who took more games over throughout the course of the season? Ty Simpson. It's not even close. And if we're asking, we're trying to see what you are as a player in college and what you're going to be asked to do in the NFL and what translates. I start with, what do you do in moments of panic with the football? Because that's really what separates good to great. I would tell you that Ty Simpson is more consistent in that regard. There's not a ton of moments of panic out of Fernando Mendoza. And then there's moments when he immediately drops his eyes and becomes a runner. Ty Simpson more consistent in that. What guy was asked to do more NFL throws? When I say NFL throws, I'm talking 15, 20, 25-yard in routes, crossing routes, deep corner or sail routes. Yeah. Ty Simpson, and it's not even close in that.
So that's Dan on Ty Simpson versus Fernando Mendoza.
Yeah, and everyone got upset and said, Dano, he's on the take, because apparently they're both rep by CAA, the agency.
Yeah.
So one last element to this. Mike T, our boss, came out and said, having spoken to clubs throughout the NFL, there are teams that believe this too.
Let me touch on that really quick, because I put that out last night, and I referenced our friend Josh Norris, and I say this on the show a lot, but let me just repeat it. I think Josh was the first person who, I don't want to say coined it, but would remind people that there are 32 teams, but there are several evaluators within teams.
Sure.
And I feel like the verbiage gets conflated a little bit. There's a team grade that is like a culmination of scouts and coaches and the general manager and the scouting directors and there's a team grade, and then there's anybody that you talk to within a team. Mm-hmm. And if you say anybody that you talk to within a team, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. So somewhere in the hundreds, there are absolutely Ty Simpson QB1 takes.
Sure.
Within the 32, I don't know. Because Dano doubled down and said, hey, I texted all these people and blah, blah, blah. And other people like, oh, I'm not hearing this. I mean, again, to survey properly, you'd literally have to talk to all 32, somewhere at the executive level of all 32 teams, and say, please give me your quarterback board, of which they don't always like to tell you.
Right. You're honest.
Right.
Actually give me the honest answer.
And then say,
question.
Of the 32 teams, 28 have Mendoza, 4 have Simpson. And so there are, and so I don't buy any of this. I talk to teams, and not saying Mike T, whoever, he's our boss. But I don't know. You're either not getting real information, or you're not getting it from the top of the source, or you're getting it from, the Southeastern Scout or something.
Yeah.
And he's not representative of the team necessarily.
There's also, there are teams that are simply not really in the quarterback market. How much has Buffalo honestly ground the tape on Mendoza versus Ty Simpson to the degree where their opinion really makes a difference?
It's a great point.
Right? Brandon Beane. How much has Brandon Beane sat down and dedicated his life to this question so that he can honestly answer?
Jeremy Bernard.
Right.
Ty Simpson tape.
So that he can honestly answer Dano's question when it comes up. You know what I mean? His take probably is irrelevant on this. So the point is that overall, I don't even have any problem believing that there are teams out there that believe that Ty Simpson is the better quarterback of the two. I don't think this is a crazy take. I don't agree with it, and I think it's wrong, but I don't think it's nuts to be like, oh, this is one of the craziest hot takes, shouty show piece of material I've ever heard. Aside from anything else, if you don't like Mendoza, did you hear the things he was saying? Some of the things he was saying there, right? And we talked about this with Greg Cosell a bit, and we've talked about it when we did our prospect profiles a little bit. If you had concerns about Mendoza, I don't know about that RPO heavy offense, and he's got a tendency to run out of the back of pockets and stuff. If you hated that, these are some of the things that you would prefer about Ty Simpson. Like, Mendoza's running this like quirky RPO offense with his no full field reads, and that doesn't translate to the next level. Meanwhile, Ty Simpson's out here running a much more conventional NFL style offense where he does go through progressions 1 to 2 to 3 to check down. Like it's the stuff Peyton Manning did, right? Drop back 1, 2, 3, check down to the running back and out. That's great. Like if you love that kind of stuff, you're going to be all over Ty Simpson. So I don't have a trouble believing that there are people out there that believe Ty Simpson is the better quarterback prospect of the two. And in this world where, like, it is a crapshoot, you're taking the percentages. It's best. Like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Kurt Warner likes his style of quarterback. Other people like a different style of quarterback. That's their trend. Doesn't it make sense? Like, I don't see what the big deal is. Like, Dano thinks that. I think he's wrong. Okay, move on.
First
it's
off,
not nuts.
Yes. So first off, all of us need to have a memory of more than like the last 30 minutes. And I'll start with, it's okay to have different quarterback takes in particular, right? Being so bold in one quarterback take to the point where if someone disagrees, you think they're an idiot or they're on the take or whatever it is. And so the reason why they think they're on the take is the CIA. They're repped by the same agency. I don't buy that, especially with Dan in particular. I don't buy it. So
even McAfee, who got him on a show to drag him, because obviously McAfee, Indiana,
McAfee's creating content and
sure, but McAfee got him, but the local thing as well, like Indiana boy.
True.
Anyway, McAfee got him on, dragged him. Apparently Dano wouldn't answer his FaceTime that evening. But even McAfee was like, look, Dano believes what he's saying. Like, people should give him credit for that. You can rip his take or whatever.
Of course.
But, like, Dano goes to the tape, believes what he says it, and then gets upset that people get upset by it. And, we've all been there.
Like, if you're falsely accused of something, it should irritate you. If you're if you're truly falsely accused of something, it should irritate you to no end, because you're sitting there like minding your own business, right, doing whatever you normally do, and somebody, not only are you falsely accused, but then it, runs rampant and everybody believes it.
Sure.
We've, dealt with this when people say you're biased about this, or your agents are paying for your PFF grades or whatever.
The Herbert thing. Like the number of people.
The Herbert thing, right?
You're just trying to, like, I'm not. I'm just, that's what I thought.
Right. People thought, he's just trying to be contrarian. He's trying to be this or that. It's like, no, I put some thought into this, and I came to a different conclusion, and you could all disagree, but, you're falsely accused, essentially.
Even, like...
So I don't think there's anything nefarious going on. Now, I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that in your circles and who you communicate with, can you be influenced by things? Absolutely. I'm not even saying that's happened here. But I'm just saying, when I talk to agents, they tell you how good their players are.
Sure.
I talked to an agent one time. Let me just give you some perspective. And we were talking about a play that one of his players made. And when he got on the phone to talk to me, he said, my player, insert name here, he just wants to make a good impression here in week 1 after signing the biggest free agent deal at his position for this team in NFL history. And I'm like, did you just use a marketing line on me? Like he just said, he like introduced him as the highest paid free agent that this team's ever paid at this position. Therefore, we want to make sure we're making a good impression for the city. I was like, dude, you already have you don't have to sell him, but they don't turn it off. You know what I mean? And so like when you talk to an agent that's, say it's repping Ty Simpson, he battled some injury at the second half, and like every excuse probably gets bottled up, and every positive probably gets bottled. And at the end of the day, like, you're just being marketed to. So I have empathy in this situation. Again, I'm not saying this has happened to Dan or anybody else, but I have empathy in the situation. When you talk to someone's agent or reps, you're getting the best part of the story. And we're all human. And when you're being marketed to, it does influence you. I'm not saying it's happening here, but I'm saying it's in the realm of possibility, and that's not nefarious. That's just, normal life.
We can ask Renner this because he has one of these, but I would be curious how often a talent, like an on-air personality, like how often does he even talk to his agent outside of like, my deal's coming up, it's negotiating season. But like, let's say, I think Dano's deal was done relatively recently. That's done, right? How often does Dano even communicate with his agent enough to be influenced by anything?
I'll tell you what. There's a 0.0001% chance that the agent's like, hey, man, we got Simpson. Mendoza's over with whoever he's with. Can we get a little Simpson bump here on air?
That is extremely unlikely.
You're our key to getting into the first round here, Dan. Like, that's not happening.
Right.
I know people love that.
Extremely unlikely.
People love a good conspiracy.
Yeah.
Could the other part happen where you are in conversation with people because it's not just the agent, so to speak. Maybe you have a good relationship with whoever the agency hires to train the quarterbacks. You know what I mean? Like you might. So you have, and if you're a draft analyst, you talk to those people. Like you talk to the Jordan Palmers of the world and the people that train Jordan Palmer. I think Jordan Palmer is really good on air, and he's a good QB trainer. But when you hear Jordan Palmer on TV, he tells you that the players that he's training are great because that's what he does, right? So, like, if you talk to Jordan Palmer about his quarterbacks before the draft, you're probably going to get a good report on them.
This isn't everyone's reaction. It's like everything else when it comes to draft season. People talk in absolutes, and they talk about, like, you're an idiot if you think anything different. And yet, even just look at quarterbacks drafted by year and look at two things. Number one, can you even identify right now who the better quarterback is, right? C.J. Stroud versus Bryce Young. Who's the best quarterback from that draft class? I don't know. It might be Stroud, it might be Bryce Young, and I'm not hugely confident in either one of them right now.
It's probably Stroud. But
sure.
People could state a case for Bryce.
The Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, 4 different quarterbacks have been the best quarterback of that draft class, arguably.
After we all watch an NFL game on a Sunday, and then we roll in on a Monday, and people have completely different opinions on what they just saw. So, of course, that could happen in prospect
evaluation. It's probably Josh Allen. But if you wanted to argue that Lamar Jackson, multiple-time MVP, was the best quarterback of that draft class, I wouldn't stand too strongly against it. Baker Mayfield's turned solid, and then the last couple of years, Sam Darnold out of nowhere has been a top 10 caliber quarterback. And then you get to the ones where it's obvious, right? Like Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is obviously the best quarterback of that draft class. Zach Wilson, bust. Trey Lance, bust. Justin Fields, what he's become. Mac Jones, what he's become. Just sort of high-level backup types, bridge quarterbacks. So Lawrence is obviously the best quarterback from that draft class. After year one, it wasn't obvious, right? Like, even the ones where it's really...
If you rolled in and said Mac Jones is the better prospect, is a better quarterback than Trevor Lawrence that draft.
After year one, it wasn't obvious. And then even at draft time, where Trevor Lawrence has been this generational prospect, there were people out there that were like, I think Justin Fields is the best QB. I think, whatever. Like, there were people making that argument. So to act like everyone, if you don't believe right now that Fernando Mendoza is QB1 by a significant margin, and that's the end of conversation. Like, if you have a different belief to that, you're an idiot or you're crazy or you're just in it for the clicks. I think that's just ridiculous. Like, I have no trouble believing, based off the 2 different profiles of these people, that someone would look at Ty Simpson's tape and look at Mendoza's tape and gravitate towards the things that are positive on Simpson's tape more than the things that are positive on Mendoza's tape. I wouldn't. Like, I believe the things on Mendoza's tape are the composite is more important, and you go with Mendoza. But I don't have any trouble believing that someone would turn on the tape and gravitate towards Simpson first.
I want to read a tweet from Scott Turner, former NFL offensive coordinator. Is he still in the league somewhere? So he's responding to this. He says, regarding all QB draft discourse, I believe it is difficult for some evaluators to project how a QB will play at the next level if they don't see them executing a lot of NFL concepts on tape. Yep. That makes them rank certain players higher than they should be, or vice versa. So you're essentially, and then Connor Donick in the draft community was saying, I agree. He said something yesterday. He said he's quoting about Dan. He's just a former backup quarterback, and those guys have generally overvalued dig-heavy type quarterback aesthetics over traitier guys like, and Mendoza has much more vanilla scheme asks, right? So Mendoza is the more traitsy guy, right? Size. I think he's got a good arm. And Simpson does more NFL-type things. And so what we all need to do in evaluation, and we talk about this a lot, you're trying to eliminate as much bias as possible.
Yeah.
And bias can come from like 15 different areas. And one of them is, and I think Dan and a lot of former QBs deal with this, what did I do? What were my strengths and weaknesses? And when you see something that you couldn't do well or that Stafford did really well, and then you see this other guy do it well, you think, well, you start to equate those. And so I think that's a really good, more likely analysis in this whole thing. Is it's easier if you can see the NFL things in the opportunity to do it. And look, this is a legitimate question about Mendoza that we've been saying.
Right.
Because you haven't seen him do it as much, it is a question mark.
We talked the two major question marks of Mendoza's game that we brought up already are really concerning NFL traits, right? Like doesn't go through full field progressions and has a tendency to run out the ass end of the pocket and get himself into trouble under pressure. These are really bad things for a quarterback to have in the NFL. If you've identified those as problems during your tape study of the two of them, you're not going to like Mendoza. Like now, I think those are things he can fix. And again, like we talked to Greg, right? He's getting a lot of credit for his willingness and therefore ability to fix things because of his personality traits. And he's just all about ball and, and I think there's some validity to that. But he's getting boosted in a way a lot of other quarterbacks won't for their negatives because of that stuff, right? And if we're wrong about that, like if he's got all the will in the world, but he just doesn't do that well then he's in trouble. Like he's legitimately got some problems at the next level.
It would be really interesting if, let's say Arch Manning developed a year earlier and he was great and was in this class as expected or as people may have expected, if Dante Moore had a better finish to his season. Right. And so you'd be weighing...
There were other options.
Right. If you were weighing Dante Moore, he's younger, one great year of tape,
right,
and finished strong, Arch with the unlimited upside theoretically, and then versus Mendoza, who has like a few more of those question marks would pop up, most likely. Because you're right, like so much of... He's being propped up so much by the feels, right? It's like...
But also, by the way,
CEO quarterback.
Remember motivations and all this. Like we're talking about, you and I talk about trying to eliminate as many biases as possible because we're ultimately trying to get to just like the best possible projection and best guess, right? And I think a lot of people are trying to do that. People like Dano probably aren't. Like, sure, Dano would like to be right more than he's wrong.
He said his job is to be right, and I don't think that's his job. I don't think that's his job.
But the point is...
Our job isn't really to be right either, but sorry,
theoretically, that's kind of what everybody's shooting for, right? But ultimately, his motivation is somebody's asked him to look at the tape and give his opinion, right? It's not he would like to be right more than he's wrong, right? Because of this. Like you would like to be right so you're not getting dragged on the internet every day. But ultimately his gig is to just go and give your opinion on these quarterbacks. So
right.
If he decides this guy's better than this guy, it's not necessarily in his interest the same way it's in everybody else's interest to go, well, I'm now dealing with these 4 biases. I need to strip this out, weigh this higher. Like he's not doing a second layer of analysis on this. He's just going, I've looked at the tape. I think this guy's better. This is my take. Do with it what you will. And people did. Unfortunately, what they will is drag him for a day. The other thing, by the way, I mentioned the draft classes where it's still not clear who the best guy is. 2024 is a great example of that, right? Caleb Williams was like the cast iron pillar to post #1 guy. Then you have Jaden Daniels, rookie of the year, almost unanimous. And then you have Drake May, who now almost won MVP off the back of year 3. And yet there's probably still a fair chunk of people that believe Caleb Williams will be the best quarterback of that group. So 3 different guys over the course of 3 years have been the best quarterback from that draft class. And it's not unclear that any of it is wrong.
And you forgot who might have the best statistical case if you use the right numbers.
Yeah, if you just use the right data points and ignore everything else. Bo Nix is... Anyway.
That would be a great test.
But it's also another good one where almost, like if you come out and said somebody other than Caleb Williams was QB1 at draft time, you would take quite a lot of crap. Not as much as this time, admittedly. Nate Tice thought Drake May was QB1 in that entire process. But...
Some people had Jaden Daniels.
I know, but generally speaking, you would take some crap if you said somebody other than Caleb Williams was QB1 that year. And yet, through 3 years, it's never been clear.
So then it's
been clear, but for 3 different guys.
So now let's even if you tried to answer that question, who's the best quarterback from the 2024 class? You could make the argument that Jaden Daniels had the best individual season out of those 4.
Yep.
You could make the case that Drake May had the best individual season out of the 4. You could make the case that the 2 years of Caleb Williams, if you look at his touchdown to interception ratio,
right, that his
is the
trajectory
best.
Still says he's got the highest
and he
ceiling.
took a team to the final 8 in overtime against the Rams. You could make the case that it's Bo Nix because he's got the most touchdowns through 2 seasons since Peyton Manning or Herbert or whatever.
And the best single game of any of them is Joe Milton.
And the best single game is Joe Milton, Mr. Week 18. And Michael Penix had the best big time throw rate over a 2-month stretch of any of them. I mean, and then there's 9.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, this is the reason, though, why it's dumb to rip on somebody for their draft takes. Whatever about projecting what you're seeing to who's going to be the better NFL quarterback. Right now, in the NFL, there's no projection of, like, we're watching them play in the league that we're discussing. So in the NFL, after 2 years, it's not clear which guy is the best quarterback amongst 3, right? So how can you possibly be expected to come to a reasonable consensus that based off college tape from different teams with different supporting structures that one of these guys will definitely be better than the next guy? Like, it's just an asinine, stupid thing to be claiming.
And the previous points that you made, Caleb Williams was a wire-to-wire going number 1 overall. Trevor Lawrence was a stepped onto campus, and he was going number 1 overall. And after 1 year, Lawrence was worse than Mac Jones. And after 1 year or 2 years, Caleb Williams is in the mix with 3 other guys to be ranked as the top quarterback in his class. So I implore everybody in my old age here, because we used to have bold quarterback takes. You don't need to have bold quarterback takes. And if you hit on one, it doesn't mean you're going to hit on the next one. And if you miss on one, doesn't mean you're going to miss on the next one. And if just because somebody said, I had Josh Allen in 2018, doesn't mean I have to trust you in 2022 or 2026. I mean, it's the quarterback position. It's going to be all over the place. So we don't need to drag anybody if they're a little bit different when it comes to QBs.
I just think that
it's just dumb.
It's a huge point about it, that even in the same league with the same constant support structures, it's not always simple to be able to say which guy is objectively better or worse than another guy, right? Even when we're, like, again, we debate, like, MVP. We spent months debating who's MVP amongst these 2 guys. Like, it's not obviously clear, right? 50 different guys almost split down the middle over whether 2 different quarterbacks were the MVP. Smart people had nuanced arguments backing up 2 different people. And you're like, so...
Or a third.
Yes. Looking at the same tape with the same people, no projection involved. Like, we've just looking backwards, not forwards. You can't agree on which one of 2 guys is better, right? So how can you possibly decide that it's stupid when you're projecting with everything's going to be different? We don't even know what teams they're going to play for. And yet you're projecting, and most people are out here going, well, if you're taking the minority side of this, you're an idiot. What? Come on. That's nuts.
The one thing I would say, though, just to piggyback on the Scott Turner thing and the internet discussions, because Dan has gotten into a lot of those discussions with Kurt Warner.
Yeah.
And Kurt, just so people know, pure progression versus, coverage reads, essentially. Dan thinks pure progression is fine, right? You get to the top of your drop, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, you just eliminate as you go, and you hit the open man. And Kurt hates that. He thinks you play slow. He thinks you go to the wrong side of the field. He'd rather have an idea of the coverage, read a defender, and then make a decision off that. And he thinks you play faster. So you have 2 different styles. They're both probably viable, but they both also default to what they like the most and what they, just what they believe in the most. But if you're evaluating another player, what you believe in shouldn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, just if Dano's like, I love pure progression and Ty Simpson does it well, therefore I like him better, that's bias that he should try to eliminate, because your way of doing things isn't the only way of doing things in the NFL level. And so that's now if you're saying, hey, I'm going to be hired as offensive coordinator tomorrow, I'm going to run the scheme that I like, fine. Your bias is allowed there because you're running your scheme. But you're projecting a player to the NFL where you could go to one of 32 teams. You shouldn't have scheme bias in that. You know what I mean? So that's what we're like. If you're trying to get to the right answer, you shouldn't just say, I did it this way, therefore I like this guy because he does it the way I did. That's bias that should be eliminated. And then you actually lose the advantage of being a former player, right? Former players have insight in this and experience. If you're biased based off your own small sample life experience as a player, then that bias is working against you versus, say, people that haven't played, that don't have that. So that's what I would encourage former players to do. You can't only see the game through the eyes in which you played. I think Greg Olsen made that point when he's calling a game.
Sure.
He said, I can't call the game through the lens of how I learned the football game because it's 2026. and things have changed. And I can't be like, well, in 09 we did this. At the U we did this. You can't. You're losing it.
I just, people need to stop being so declarative and definitive about anything draft related. Like everyone, we talk about it all the time. It's a crapshoot. That adage will remain true forever. No matter how much data we have, it's still a crapshoot. The difference between the best drafting teams and the worst drafting teams is the difference of a hit rate of like 30 and 60%. Like you're still missing almost like as much as you're hitting in any capacity. So the idea that a guy who thinks the QB2 is better than QB1 is on the take, right?
It's got to be on the take.
Like Dano's getting brown paper envelopes.
No other possibility.
Dano's getting a percentage back from his agent for suggesting the QB2 is better than QB1 when they have fairly defined strengths and weaknesses that work in direct opposition to each other. It's just nuts. Like it's crazy that people went to that as opposed to Dano just likes NFL progression passers better than like it's insane.
I love it. Last thing I'm going to say on this. I've said this before. If you're going to criticize somebody, understand their argument and give the best. Like, instead of being like he's on the take and that's maybe he is. Maybe he is on the take. But could you eliminate the other possibilities first before you land there? Could you at least give him the benefit of the doubt? Because it's just sports and it's just fun.
I will say,
give him the benefit of the doubt first. Maybe he just likes progression guys. Maybe he just likes people like him. Maybe he likes lesser arm people like him. Maybe he is biased, but not because he's on the take.
There's got to be a term.
And eliminate those first.
There's got to be a term for this. It's not quite straw man, but like sometimes I think people get themselves into trouble more when they try and defend the take they had and then say something stupid, right? So Dano's take, I think, is perfectly reasonable. He then goes on McAfee and asks, like, what big games for Mendoza? And you're like, that's not... Now you've taken it somewhere silly,
know?
And the problem is he probably didn't really mean that, but there's got to be a term for like, whilst in the course of defending your originally perfectly sane take, you accidentally say something dumb that everyone latches onto.
I think it's called doubling down.
Yeah, but it's not really. It's like you've just accidentally goofed in your defense. You know what I mean? Like it's the technicality that you lose the law case on.
Thou doth protest too much deal.
Yeah, but it's not even.
It's a little bit of
it's
that.
Literally like you made a technical error in your legal defense, and that's the reason you're losing the case, as opposed to your original principle was unsound. So that is Dano's fault in all this, if he had one, was accidentally basically trying to question whether Mendoza played in any big games as he went through a run in the college football playoffs and a national title game, etc. That's not a great argument.
Whereas Simpson literally collapsed in every big game down the stretch. So right? That's not a good argument.
That I don't think helped his argument.
I agree. I completely agree.
But I don't think the original, he was, at that point, he was already being dragged, right? So the fact that he was already under siege for just suggesting that player B is better than player A, I think is nuts. Unfortunately, a lot of the times when this happens, under the firestorm, you accidentally say something stupid, and that's the thing that you can reasonably get dragged for.
I'm just continuing to encourage people, if they're going to argue against somebody, argue against the steel man, not the straw man. Dano said
right, but
this.
The problem is that's not what happens. You look for the weakness.
Of course.
As soon as somebody says something, you're like, there it is. That's what we can pounce on.
But you make your point strong. If you give him the absolute benefit of the doubt and say, maybe you care about pure progression, maybe you looked at the first 7 games, maybe you think he's got more upside because he's played less, give him the steel man and then say, and I still think Mendoza is better because this, and this.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck with that, Steve. Good luck with that. All right, we got some draft bets to get to, but quick break to talk about our friends over at Root Insurance. Root Insurance believes that good drivers deserve better rates, so they've created a new kind of car insurance that rewards good drivers in an easy-to-use app. Traditional car insurance companies, they focus on demographics like age, zip code, occupation, and credit score to price your coverage, but when Root offers a rate, your behavior behind the wheel gets more weight than any other single factor. They don't use occupation or education level to negatively affect your rate. While you drive, Root gathers and analyzes data from your smartphone sensors. After a few weeks, you'll get a car insurance quote based primarily on your driving. Save up to 44% off your initial Root quote after you take the test drive. If you need a tow truck, jump start, or lock your keys in the car, the Root will cover the help you need to get back on the road when you opt into roadside assistance. The Root app makes it easy to edit your coverage, update your policy, or file a claim in just 3 minutes. You get started today at Root.com. We're wrapping it up today with some draft bets that have come in. So we encourage everybody to send them in. These are bold takes, bold bets that you want to make. Check the mic at the33rdteam.com. It's never will my team ever do this season. It's Ty Simpson is QB1 season. So make your predictions, and we'll put up some merch, and you can put up some coffee, whatever it may be, salmon, as we've said. So I've got a few to read, and we'll either accept, decline, we'll go from there. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Zavi Gotham says the Bills would trade out of the first round and into the second and draft Zion Young. Very specific.
Yeah.
And he's offering coffee from a broke college student versus merch. I almost feel bad taking coffee.
I was going to say, let's not take coffee off.
I won't take the coffee. I'll put up if that specific thing happens. That's bold.
Yeah,
I'm in. Absolutely, we'll take that. Tim Allen is back, former winner,
presumably not the tool man.
Not the tool man. I like this. NFL Executive of the Year, John Schneider, will involve the 32nd pick of the 2026 NFL Draft in some sort of trade, either for players or for picks. Now, is that bold enough? I don't know. But he's offering 1 pound of local campfire coffee versus merchandise. I feel like that's almost as likely as not. It's probably like 50-50 that the teams at the back end will trade.
Really? 50-50? How often does that happen?
I mean, 40%. I don't know. Yeah, I'll do it.
That a specific pick is traded.
I don't mind.
It's not like the craziest thing in the world, but it doesn't feel like it's a 50-50. I still feel like that's in our favor.
I accept. Local campfire coffee. If it doesn't happen, I'll be rooting hard for this one to not happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we accept. Maxwell Trail has a couple. So this was fun. He sent this one weeks ago before the Max Crosby initial trade happened. He said, if Vega Ioane is on the board, there is no way, all caps, the Ravens will pass on him. This is what we're talking about. This is what we want. These are takes where I know my team so well. I know exactly what they're going to do. You don't know. You guys are idiots. I know, and I'm going to tell you what they're going to do. There's no way the Ravens will pass on him. Now, this happened before they traded pick 14.
I wonder whether that would change.
And he emailed again and said, well, I guess we're off. And then a couple days later, emailed. They said, well, we're back on again. So we're back on. We accept. He wants an XL black hoodie versus a bag of coffee or football cards.
Or football cards.
Yeah, it depends on the cards.
Wait, which way are the cards coming?
I mean, it's versus a bag of coffee or football cards.
So we're getting the cards.
Yes. I don't think we're getting an XL black hoodie.
No, I was not confused about where the hoodie went.
The black hoodie versus
yeah,
a bag of coffee
it's
or
like
football
cards. It's like the pick swap, like who's moving up or who's moving down. I was confused as to where the playing cards were going.
I mean, I'd probably prefer the coffee, but it depends on the cards.
I have no interest in cards.
Maxwell also has said Ty Simpson will, without a doubt, he does a good job yelling with caps, be a New York Jet.
Okay.
So I'm in on both. I'll accept both. I like those bold takes. We're accepting here today. Amos has Denzel Boston goes in the top 22 picks of the draft. I haven't seen his over-under. That does feel like that's the cutoff maybe for him, but I've seen him more back end of the first, and because enough people are getting so mad that he's 6'4" and remind them of Keon Coleman and N'Keal Harry and everything, I feel like this is maybe on the bold side here. Will the NFL like Denzel Boston better than where perception's going? I think he's falling a little bit in the consensus ranks.
Yeah, where does the bet put him?
22.
Higher or at
higher?
22?
First 22.
First 22.
Am I reading that right? Yeah, top 22. He is currently down at 29 in the consensus board.
That doesn't feel crazy. Like it doesn't feel bold enough to me. Like first,
doesn't feel crazy. I
think it's aggressive, but it's not unreasonable.
I'll counter Amos. Now he's offering.
Like how high would you need to put him before you're like that probably doesn't happen?
He said he has good coffee from New York. If I'm right, I get to give you guys a football thought experiment prompt for at least a few minutes of the show sometime this offseason.
Oh, that's easy.
That's what he's putting up.
Yeah.
If you want to counter and say, hey, make it top 20, top 18, how bold do you want to go, Amos? If you're listening, make it a little bolder.
Top 22 feels too within the realms of possibility.
Because I bet his over-unders right. Like right now, the mocks have him going 24 to the Browns.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. Like it wouldn't take that much for you to be just a couple spots above that. Like how high would it need to be before you're like, that would be a huge shot?
All right, come back. Come back with a more aggressive, higher pick.
More aggression.
Good coffee from New York,
aggression.
Jalen Baskin, he had a longer email that says he thinks, very boldly, that the Raiders quarterback next year will be none other than Aaron Rodgers. And that because of that, the Raiders will trade the number 1 overall pick to the Dolphins. Yeah. Accepted.
Yeah, 100%. There's almost no way that
He's
happens.
putting up two $25 Visa gift cards. You can just buy all the coffee you want. $50 worth of coffee. Absolutely, Jalen. That is as bold as it gets. It might be double the merch if that thing happens. Mark Cunningham, as the 49ers will trade up to the top 10 to get their pick of pass catchers, and it will be Kenyon Sadiq.
Well, yes, if it's a will be thing, because that's always.
Oh, yeah.
But,
I mean, even the Niners trading up into the top. If they trade up into the top 10 and take a pass catcher.
Honestly, just them trading up into the top 10, I think I would probably take.
Yeah.
Like San Francisco at 27, trading into the top 10.
We have some leeway here. If this one gets close, we'll probably
I think I would accept that on its own.
Yeah.
So any gradation of that, I think the guy probably
keep the
wins.
Sadiq thing, but we'll remember when we.
I mean, if you hit on Sadiq, then
double
fair play. But I'd be considering a win for almost any element of that.
Coffee from Noma Coffee. PNEUMA. Noma.
What?
PNEUMA.
Like
pneumonia, but without the pneumonia.
Coffee. Like pneumonia, but coffee. Yeah, coffee roaster. Cincinnati. They're local.
Oh, there we go. I should know this. We get to pick the roast.
5.0
reviews. We're gonna have a lot of coffee.
A perfect 5-star review on Google.
Beautiful. Simon Hugh says the Saints are going to make a move up to select a running back. Nothing wagered. Now he doesn't specify. I would say let's specify.
Etienne.
It's bold. Having just now, I don't know if this came in before free agency.
Right.
I don't remember the timing of it. So, Simon, I would just say if you want to be a little bit more specific, is this like the first 2 rounds? Because if they trade up for a running back in round 6, I don't know if that fits the ethos here. So let's say a hard maybe here. If we can get more specific.
If this came in before and
if it came in before free agency,
we're not holding him.
Certainly not. Yeah. And then Drew Ferris has a couple coffee versus merch. He's got Omar Cooper Jr. getting drafted before Jordan Tyson.
Okay.
Now, is this more likely to happen now with all the injury?
It's more it's not. I don't think that would be shocking to me.
I would say no on that because the next 2 are pretty solid. So I'll accept both of these from Drew.
Okay.
Ty Simpson will get drafted on day 3.
Oh. Okay.
Now, if we were saying this about Shadur last year at this time, that would sound wild and crazy. So it's not that wild and crazy, but I think that's bold enough to accept.
Still pretty, like that. But that means he's got to get through forget rounds 1 and 2. He's got to get through the 3rd round.
Oh yeah. I understand what day 3 is. Yeah.
But there are people that might not be.
Yes.
For you.
So he'll be drafted round 4 or later.
Yeah.
So yes, accepted. In this one, Jeremiyah Love falls to pick 18 in the Minnesota Vikings.
I like that.
That's good.
Isn't that where? Didn't we do that recently? Or I had him sliding somewhere.
In our mock with franchise guy.
Yeah.
We had him falling and falling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Somebody recently, was it Thor, had a mock draft of the Vikings trading up to get him.
Really?
Yeah.
Like Kwesi leaves and they just start going nuts?
Yeah.
Give me the best player.
Right. Trading up for Love. He had him trading back then to try and get some picks back later on. It was kind of a fun draft, actually.
So there we go. Draft bets. So instead of doing one big show at the end, we'll start reading these as we go, Wednesday, Thursday, during our shows. So get them in. Check the mic at the33team.com. Remember, the criteria is something bold, something you're saying is going to happen, particularly if you know your team inside and out, you know their trends, you know what they're going to do. We don't know what they're going to do, but you do. Let us know what they're going to do. All right, man. Great show. A lot of fun. I'm heading to the ballpark today.
Yeah.
Opening day.
Do you have to be straight out of here, or do we have time for one individual profile?
Well, my buddy Mike's at the airport waiting for me, but he's eating. He's got his son there. I got to go pick them up. He said take your time. So
you got 10 minutes.
I got 10 minutes. I could do a profile.
Right. So we
Mo Hall was
gifting memberships,
throwing memberships at people, and because he did that, I will stick around for a profile.
Who do you want to do?
Did we have Sadiq?
Yeah, we can do Sadiq.
Let's do. We're gonna talk Kenyon Sadiq here for members only. So I'm gonna head to opening day. So I've got really quick. I've got the Boston shirt that's been gifted. It's Red Sox Reds, and I've got my Reds jersey. Now I would not wear this because my name's on the back, and that's just Embarrassing. But I'm going to go there as a Red Sox fan and as a Reds fan. I'll be wearing a Reds hat and a Red Sox shirt.
Okay.
Just for fun here.
Is that allowed?
Yeah, I'm going to do it anyway.
Would that not be frowned upon by the people?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of funny. But I'll see you out there. It's loaded for opening day. We get the parade's going on right now. The rain's going to stop. Should be a beautiful day here. So looking forward to it.
Really? Because it wasn't earlier.
No, it's supposed to. It's supposed to clear
Miserable.
up. It's supposed to clear up. I'm going to go pick up listener Mike. Mike listens. Power listener over there. I'm going to go pick him up at the airport and head down to the stadium.
All right.
All right, let's wrap this up. We're going to be here Monday morning, 9 a.m. More Check the Mic. We're going to get our 1-minute countdown for members. Do our player profiles. Go check out the video tab if you haven't already on the YouTube channel, because that's where a lot of these profiles are coming out, having some in-depth discussions and breakdowns. It's exciting for me hearing your first in-depth opinion on a lot of these players after really grinding the film, because you always have unique takes on the players. So, all right, we're good.